Welcome to Crime Stories for Sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it there? The file cabinet drawer slides open with a soft metallic whisper in the basement of the Saltmere police station. Detective Inspector Sarah Chun removes a manila folder marked with faded blue ink. Case number 20190-847. Missing person. Elena Vasquez, age 34. The paper feels slightly damp from the coastal air that perpetually seeps through the old stone walls of the building that has served this quiet village for nearly a century. Elena Vasquez disappeared on a Thursday evening in October 2019. The initial report states that she left her cottage on Harbor View Lane at approximately 7:30 in the evening, telling her neighbor Mrs. Pemberton that she was going for her usual walk along the cliff path. Mrs. Pemberton, aged 72, had been tending to her evening primrose plants when Elena called out over the low stone wall that separated their gardens. The cottage Elena rented sits 3 streets back from the harbor, a narrow stone building with blue-painted window frames and a small garden filled with salt-resistant plants. Rosemary, lavender, and sea buckthorn grew in neat rows along the path leading to her front door. The landlord, Mr. Jeffrey Hartwell, had maintained the property for 15 years, and Elena had been his most reliable tenant for the past 2 years. Elena worked as a freelance translator, specializing in maritime documents and shipping manifests. Her home office occupied the small second bedroom, where she kept a collection of dictionaries in 7 languages and a computer that connected to clients across Europe. The work suited the quiet rhythm of village life, and neighbors often mentioned how they would see the warm glow of her desk lamp in the evening hours, casting gentle light through the upstairs window. The cliff path Elena walked that October evening stretches for 3 miles along the coast, beginning at the village harbor and ending at an old lighthouse that ceased operations in 1963. The path varies in width from 6 feet to barely 2 feet in places where erosion has claimed portions of the walkway. Wooden railings appear intermittently, installed by the village council where the drop to the rocks below exceeds 50 feet. Local residents have used this path for generations. Morning joggers, evening walkers, and tourists seeking views of the channel all frequent the route during daylight hours. After sunset, the path becomes less populated, used mainly by villagers who have walked it countless times and know every turn and dip by memory. Elena's routine was well established. Each evening, weather permitting, she would finish her work by 7 o'clock, change into walking boots and a waterproof jacket, and set out for the cliffs. Her usual route took her approximately 45 minutes, bringing her back to the cottage by 8:15. She would then prepare a simple dinner and spend the remainder of the evening reading or corresponding with clients in different time zones. The evening of October 24th, 2019, brought clear skies and mild temperatures. The weather station located at the harbor recorded a temperature of 14 degrees Celsius with light winds from the southwest. Visibility extended beyond the horizon, and the tide charts show low tide occurring at 9:47 that evening. Mrs. Pemberton finished her gardening work at approximately 8:30 and expected to see Elena returning from her walk. The path from the cliffs passes directly in front of both cottages, and Mrs. Pemberton had grown accustomed to Elena's punctual return. When 9 o'clock arrived without any sign of Elena, Mrs. Pemberton began to feel concerned, but assumed her neighbor might have extended her walk or stopped to speak with someone along the way. By 10 o'clock, Mrs. Pemberton noticed that no lights had been turned on in Elena's cottage. The usual glow from the kitchen window remained absent, and the pathway to the front door stayed dark. Mrs. Pemberton called Elena's mobile phone, but the call went directly to voicemail. She left a brief message asking Elena to call when she returned home. The next morning, Friday, October 25th, Mrs. Pemberton noticed that the curtains in Elena's cottage remained closed and no newspapers had been collected from the front step. She knocked on the door at 8 o'clock but received no response. The spare key Elena had given her for emergencies hung on a hook in Mrs. Pemberton's kitchen, but she hesitated to use it, hoping Elena might appear at any moment with a reasonable explanation for her absence. By 10 o'clock that Friday morning, Mrs. Pemberton contacted the Saltmere police station. Constable Mark Davies arrived at the cottage within 20 minutes. His patrol car parked carefully on the narrow lane to avoid blocking the path used by delivery vehicles and residents. Constable Davies knocked on the front door and called Elena's name. He walked around the cottage, checking the small back garden and the single window on each side of the building. All windows remained securely latched from inside, and no signs of disturbance were visible around the property. Elena's silver Honda Civic remained parked in its usual spot beside the cottage. The doors locked and no items visible inside. Mrs. Pemberton provided Constable Davies with the spare key, and together they entered the cottage. The interior appeared exactly as Elena would have left it for an evening walk. Her computer remained on the desk upstairs, displaying a completed translation of a German shipping contract. A coffee cup sat beside the keyboard, empty but for a small amount of residue that suggested it had been finished hours earlier. Elena's walk-in boots were missing from the rack beside the front door, along with her blue waterproof jacket and the small backpack she carried on longer walks. Her mobile phone was not in the cottage, though its charging cable remained plugged into the wall beside her bed. Her wallet and identification documents were also missing. The bedroom showed no signs of hasty packing or disturbance. Clothing hung neatly in the wardrobe, and Elena's passport remained in the top drawer of her dresser, along with her birth certificate and other important documents. Her laptop computer contained no recent travel, bookings or communications suggesting planned departure from the village. Constable Davies completed his initial survey of the cottage and grounds by 11:30 Friday morning. He noted that nothing appeared to be missing except the items Elena would normally take on an evening walk. The cottage remained secure, with no evidence of forced entry or signs of struggle. His report describes the scene as consistent with Elena's normal departure for her daily walk, with the significant exception that she had not returned. The search for Elena began Friday afternoon with a systematic examination of the cliff path. Constable Davies was joined by Sergeant Patricia Wright and 2 volunteers from the village: James Morrison, a retired geography teacher familiar with every section of the coastal route, and Helen Foster, who had walked the cliffs daily for 12 years and knew the typical hazards faced by evening walkers. The team began at the harbor end of the path, examining the route Elena would have taken. The first half-mile of the path presents relatively stable ground with occasional wooden steps built into the steeper sections. This portion of the walk passes 3 benches installed by the village council, each positioned to provide views of the channel and the shipping lanes visible in the distance. First bench sits approximately 10 minutes from the village, positioned where the path makes a gentle curve around a small bay. The second bench marks the halfway point of most villagers' evening walks, located at the highest elevation of the path with views extending 20 miles on clear days. The third bench occupies a sheltered spot where wind-carved stones provide natural protection from coastal breezes. The search team found no trace of Elena at any of the 3 benches. No personal items, no disturbance of the gravel surrounding each seating area, no indication that anyone had rested at these spots recently. The wooden surfaces of the benches showed the typical accumulation of salt spray and fallen leaves, but no evidence of recent human presence. Beyond the third bench, the path begins a gradual descent toward the old lighthouse. This section presents more challenging terrain, with sections where erosion has narrowed the walkway and areas where loose stones create unstable footing. The village council had planned to install additional safety railings along this portion, but had not yet completed the work in October 2019. Asterisk. The search team examined every section of the descending path with careful attention to areas where a walker might lose footing or stray from the main route. James Morrison led the group to several spots where previous accidents had occurred over the years, places where emergency services had responded to injured walkers, or where the path itself had been damaged by winter storms. At the base of the cliffs near the lighthouse, the team found the remains of the wooden pier that once served vessels bringing supplies to the lighthouse keepers. The pier structure had been partially destroyed by storms in the 1980s, leaving concrete foundations and scattered timber that created hazardous footing during high tide. The lighthouse itself stands locked and unused, its windows boarded and access stairs removed for safety reasons. The building shows decades of weathering from coastal storms, with paint peeling from the metal framework and vegetation growing through cracks in the foundation. No evidence suggested that anyone had attempted to enter the structure recently. The search team completed their examination of the entire cliff path by 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. They had covered 3 miles of coastal terrain, examining every section where Elena might have encountered difficulty or chosen to leave the main route. No trace of her presence was discovered beyond what would be expected from any regular walker using the path. Saturday morning brought additional search personnel to Saltmere. The Regional Search and Rescue Coordinator, Inspector David Fleming, arrived with a team of 6 volunteers and 2 search dogs trained in finding missing persons. The expanded search would cover areas beyond the cliff path, including sections of beach accessible only during low tide and inland routes Elena might have taken if she decided to vary her usual routine. The search dogs, a German Shepherd named Rex and a Border Collie named Sage, were given items of Elena's clothing to establish her scent. Both dogs showed initial interest at Elena's cottage, following the trail from her front door toward the cliff path. The scent trail remained strong for approximately half a mile before becoming more difficult to follow due to the foot traffic from other walkers. Using the popular route, Rex, the German Shepherd, followed the scent trail to the second bench overlooking the channel. At this location, the dog displayed behavior suggesting that Elena had spent time resting or observing the view. The handler, Margaret Collins, noted that Rex circled the bench area repeatedly and showed signs of detecting a stronger scent concentration than found along other sections of the path. Sage, the Border Collie, followed a similar route but continued past the second bench toward the lighthouse. The dog's behavior suggested that Elena's scent continued along the path, though it became increasingly faint as the trail approached the more challenging terrain of the path's final section. Neither dog detected Elena's scent beyond the lighthouse area. Both animals were walked along the beach approaches and the inland routes leading away from the coast, but no further trace of Elena's presence was discovered. The handlers concluded that Elena had followed her usual route at least as far as the lighthouse area, but that weather conditions and time had eliminated any scent trail. Beyond that point, the expanded search continued through the weekend, with teams examining coastal areas previously considered inaccessible or unlikely. Small boats provided by local fishermen allowed search personnel to examine sea caves and rocky areas that could not be reached on foot. The boats also enabled searchers to view the cliff face from below, looking for any sign that someone might have fallen or encountered difficulty along the elevated sections of the path. The fishing boat captains, familiar with every inlet and formation along the coast, guided search teams to locations where currents might carry objects or where tides might deposit items from the cliff path area. These experienced mariners knew the patterns of wind and water that affected the coastline and could identify areas where evidence might accumulate. If someone had encountered difficulty near the cliffs, no trace of Elena or her belongings was found. During the marine portion of the search, the boat crews examined every accessible cave, beach, and rocky area along 5 miles of coastline. They recovered several items deposited by tides over recent months: pieces of fishing equipment, plastic containers, and other debris commonly found along shipping routes, but nothing connected to Elena's disappearance. The weekend search efforts concluded Sunday evening with no significant discoveries. Inspector Fleming prepared a report summarizing the extensive search activities and recommending that the case be classified as a missing person investigation requiring continued monitoring and periodic review. The search had covered all accessible terrain within reasonable distance of Elena's last known location, employing both ground teams and marine resources with no results. Elena's family was contacted through information found in her cottage. Her sister Maria, living in Barcelona, traveled to Saltmere on Monday, October 28th. Maria provided additional background about Elena's life and habits that helped investigators understand her routine and state of mind. In the weeks before her disappearance, Elena had maintained regular contact with her family through weekly phone calls and monthly video chats. Her most recent communication with Maria had occurred this Sunday before her disappearance. A normal conversation discussing Elena's work projects and Maria's plans for Christmas holidays. Nothing in their conversation suggested that Elena was experiencing difficulties or considering any changes to her settled routine in Saltmere. Maria described her sister as methodical and careful, someone who planned activities in advance and rarely made impulsive decisions. Elena's choice to live in a quiet coastal village reflected her preference for predictable routines and her enjoyment of solitary activities like walking and reading. The idea that Elena would suddenly abandon her life in Saltmere without notification seemed entirely inconsistent with her character. The sisters had maintained a close relationship despite the geographic distance between them. Elena visited Barcelona each summer, and Maria had come to Saltmere twice since Elena's move to the village. Maria was familiar with Elena's cottage, her work routine, and her daily walks along the cliff path. She could provide no explanation for Elena's disappearance and confirmed that Elena had given no indication of problems or concerns during their most recent conversations. Elena's financial records, examined with Maria's permission, revealed a stable situation with regular income from translation work and modest living expenses appropriate to village life. Her bank account showed normal patterns of spending on groceries, utilities, and occasional purchases of books or clothing. No unusual transactions appeared in the weeks before her disappearance, and no large withdrawals suggested advance planning for departure or travel. Her computer and email accounts contained routine correspondence with clients and family members. Work-related communications showed several ongoing projects with expected completion dates extending into November and December 2019. Elena had not notified any clients about potential delays or changes to her availability, suggesting that she had no intention of interrupting her work schedule. The investigation expanded to include interviews with other village residents who might have observed Elena on the evening of her disappearance. Saltmere's small population meant that most residents were familiar with Elena by sight, and many knew her routine of evening walks along the cliff path. Mrs. Dorothy Henley, who lived in a cottage with a view of the path's beginning near the harbor, reported seeing Elena pass by at approximately 7:30-5 on the evening of October 24th. Elena appeared to be walking at her normal pace and wore her usual blue jacket and small backpack. Mrs. Henley noted this timing because she had been preparing dinner and observed the kitchen clock when she saw Elena through her window. Mr. Thomas Brewster, walking his terrier along the harbor that evening, remembered seeing Elena on the path but could not provide a specific time. His dog had shown interest in following Elena's route, which was typical behavior when the terrier encountered familiar scents from other regular walkers. Mr. Brewster recalled that Elena appeared to be in good spirits, walking with the steady rhythm of someone enjoying their routine exercise. 3 teenagers from the village reported seeing Elena earlier that evening, before her walk, when she visited the village shop to purchase items for dinner. The shop owner, Mrs. Angela Price, confirmed that Elena had bought bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine at approximately 6:15. Elena's manner had seemed normal, and she mentioned looking forward to her evening walk. Because the clear weather provided excellent views of the channel. No residents reported seeing Elena returned from her walk that evening. The path from the cliffs passes through the most populated area of the village, where several houses have clear views of returning walkers. The absence of any sightings of Elena after her departure suggested that she had not completed her usual route back to the cottage. Investigation examined weather conditions and environmental factors that might have affected Elena's walk on October 24th. Detailed records from the coastal weather station showed optimal conditions for walking, with clear skies, mild temperatures, and light winds. Visibility remained excellent throughout the evening hours, with sunset occurring at 6:48 and full darkness not arriving until after 8:30. Tide conditions posed no unusual hazards that evening. Low tide occurred well after Elena's typical return time, meaning that beach areas and rocky sections would be accessible if she chose to explore beyond the main path. The calm sea conditions would not have created dangerous wave action against the cliffs or unusual spray that might make the path treacherous. Local authorities consulted with experts on coastal safety and cliff path maintenance to understand potential hazards Elena might have encountered. The path had been inspected by village maintenance crews in September 2019, with minor repairs completed to address loose railings and erosion damage from summer storms. No significant safety concerns had been identified that would pose risks to experienced walkers familiar with the route. Geological surveys of the cliff area revealed stable underlying rock formations with no recent signs of erosion or structural weakness. The cliffs consisted primarily of limestone and chalk deposits that provided solid foundation for the walking path. While normal coastal erosion continued gradually over decades, no sudden changes or hazardous conditions had developed recently. The investigation considered whether Elena might have encountered another person during her walk, either someone she knew or a stranger who might have influenced her movements or decisions. October evenings typically brought few visitors to the cliff path, as tourist season had ended and most recreational walkers preferred daylight hours for safety reasons. Village residents who regularly used the path reported normal conditions that evening, with no unusual activity or unfamiliar persons observed along the route. The harbor master noted that no visiting boats had anchored in the bay that day, and no unusual vehicle traffic had been reported on the narrow lanes leading to cliff path access points. Police records for the surrounding region showed no reports of criminal activity or suspicious behavior in the weeks before Elena's disappearance. The area maintained a reputation for safety, with crime statistics showing only minor incidents related to property damage or domestic disputes. No patterns of activity suggested that Elena might have encountered someone with harmful intentions. The possibility that Elena had chosen to leave Saltmere voluntarily received careful consideration. Her personal belongings, financial situation, and family relationships suggested a settled life with no obvious motivation for sudden departure. However, investigators recognize that people sometimes make unexpected decisions for reasons that are not apparent to others. Elena's passport remained in her cottage, limiting her ability to travel internationally without returning for essential documents. Her financial accounts showed no advance planning for travel, and no transportation bookings were found in her name. Her car remained parked beside her cottage, and no evidence suggested that she had arranged alternative transportation. The investigation examined Elena's online activity and digital communications for any indication of plans or concerns that might explain her disappearance. Her internet browsing history showed routine activities, work-related research, correspondence with clients, online shopping for household items, and reading news from her home region in Spain. Social media accounts revealed minimal activity, consistent with Elena's preference for privacy and quiet living. Her most recent posts showed photographs of coastal views from her evening walks and brief updates about translation projects. No communication suggested dissatisfaction with her life in Saltmere or interest in making significant changes. Email correspondence with friends and professional contacts contained no indication of problems or plans for departure. Elena's messages maintained their usual tone and content, discussing ongoing work projects and making tentative plans for holiday visits with family members. Her final email, sent the morning of her disappearance, confirmed delivery of a completed translation to a client in Amsterdam. The formal search operations concluded after 2 weeks, having covered all accessible areas within reasonable distance of Elena's last known location. The case remained classified as an active missing person investigation, with periodic reviews scheduled to assess new information or developments. The missing person file documented comprehensive search efforts involving professional search teams, trained dogs, marine resources, and extensive ground coverage. The investigation had examined Elena's background, financial situation, relationships, and personal circumstances without discovering any explanation for her disappearance. Local authorities maintained increased patrols of the cliff path area and established procedures for reporting any discoveries that might relate to Elena's case. Village residents were provided with contact information for reporting relevant observations, and seasonal visitors were made aware of the ongoing investigation. Elena's sister, Maria, remained in contact with local authorities and returned to Barcelona after 2 weeks in Saltmere. She arranged for Elena's belongings to be preserved in the cottage, maintained the rental agreement with Mr. Hartwell, and ensured that Elena's financial obligations continued to be met in case she returned. The case file grew to include detailed documentation of all search efforts, interviews with residents and family members, technical reports on weather and environmental conditions, and comprehensive examination of Elena's personal circumstances. Each piece of information was carefully recorded and cross-referenced, creating a thorough record for future investigators. As weeks passed into months, the initial intensity of the investigation gradually diminished, though the case remained officially active. Periodic reviews examined any new information reported by residents or authorities, and seasonal searches were conducted when weather conditions permitted access to areas that had been inaccessible. During the initial investigation, the anniversary of Elena's disappearance brought renewed attention to the case. Local media coverage prompted several residents to contact authorities with observations they had not previously considered significant. These reports were carefully evaluated, though none provided substantial new evidence or altered the basic facts of the case. Detective Inspector Chen reviews these anniversary reports as she prepares to close Elena's file for the evening. The investigation remains officially active, though no significant developments have emerged in the years since Elena's disappearance. The comprehensive search efforts and thorough documentation create a complete record of one of the most puzzling cases in Saltmere's quiet history. The cottage on Harbor View Lane remains empty, its garden now overgrown with the salt-resistant plants Elena had cultivated. Mrs. Pemberton continues her evening routine, though she no longer expects to see Elena returning from the cliff path at 8:15 each night. The village has absorbed this mystery into its collective memory, a reminder that even in the quietest places, some questions remain without answers. The cliff path continues to attract evening walkers, though residents now tend to complete their walks before full darkness and rarely venture to the lighthouse area alone. The village council installed additional safety railings and improved lighting along the most challenging sections of the route, improvements that came too late to address whatever circumstances led to Elena's disappearance. Elena's translation business closed gradually as clients were notified of her unavailability. Her reputation for careful, accurate work was remembered by colleagues across Europe, though the circumstances of her disappearance remained as mysterious to professional associates as to her neighbors in Saltmere. The investigation file remains in the basement cabinet of the police station, available for review by investigators who might discover new evidence or develop fresh perspectives on the documented facts. The case represents hundreds of hours of careful police work, community cooperation, and professional search efforts that produced no resolution despite thoroughness and dedication. Detective Inspector Chun closes Elena's file and returns it to its position in the drawer. The October evening outside the police station brings the same mild temperatures and clear skies that marked Elena's final walk along the cliffs. The harbor, lights reflect on calm water, and the lighthouse beam that once guided ships to safety continues its automated rotation, illuminating empty waters where answers might never surface. Asterisk. The mountain town of Cedar Ridge sits at an elevation of 4,000 feet, where the air remains crisp even during summer months, and the night sky displays stars with unusual clarity. The town's main street stretches for 6 blocks, lined with shops that serve both local residents and the seasonal visitors who come to hike the surrounding trails and enjoy the mountain scenery. Officer Janet Morrison arrives at the police station each morning at 7 o'clock, when the mountain peaks catch the first light and cast long shadows across the valley. She has served Cedar Ridge for 8 years, following her transfer from the state police after deciding that small-town law enforcement offered the community connection she preferred over highway patrol duties. The night shift reports that accumulate on Officer Morrison's desk each morning typically involve minor incidents, noise complaints from the seasonal campground, minor traffic violations on the winding mountain roads, or occasional medical calls for hikers who overestimate their abilities on challenging trails. Cedar Ridge maintains a reputation as a peaceful community where serious crime remains rare. Asterisk, however, during the autumn months of 2021, Officer Morrison began noticing an unusual pattern in the overnight reports. Several local business owners had contacted the police station to report strange incidents occurring after their establishments closed for the evening. These reports shared common elements that gradually formed a picture of systematic activity that was difficult to explain. The first report came from Mrs. Helen Crawford, owner of Crawford's Hardware Store, a family business operating on Main Street for 37 years. Mrs. Crawford contacted police on Tuesday morning, September 14th, to report that someone had been examining her store during the previous night. She discovered footprints in the soft earth of the flower bed beneath her front windows and noticed that the exterior security light had been repositioned to shine toward the street rather than illuminating the storefront. Mrs. Crawford's store occupies a brick building, constructed in 1952, with large plate glass windows displaying seasonal merchandise and tools needed by local residents. The building sits directly on the sidewalk, with a narrow flower bed containing autumn mums and decorative cabbage planted between the foundation and the concrete walkway. The footprints Mrs. Crawford discovered measured approximately 11 inches in length, suggesting a man-size 10 or 11 boot with a distinctive tread pattern. The impressions appeared fresh, pressed deep into the damp soil from the previous evening's rain. The person wearing these boots had stood at each of the 3 front windows, apparently looking into the store for extended periods. Based on the depth and clarity of the impressions, security light that Mrs. Crawford found repositioned was mounted on a metal bracket beside the front door. The light could be rotated by hand, but required deliberate effort to change its direction. Someone had carefully adjusted the fixture so that instead of illuminating the store's entrance and windows, it cast light across the street toward the mountain outfitting shop operated by the Patterson family. Officer Morrison photographed the footprints and took measurements of the boot impressions. She noted the precise positioning of each footprint and observed that the person had approached the store from the alley running behind the buildings on Main Street. The individual had walked along the side of Crawford's Hardware before, positioning themselves at each front window. Mrs. Crawford reported that nothing appeared to be missing from inside the store. The cash register had been emptied the previous evening, according to her standard closing procedures, and all tools and merchandise remained in their proper locations. The store's simple alarm system had not been triggered, as no one had attempted to enter the building or tamper with the doors or windows. The second report arrived 3 days later from Mr. David Chun, owner of Mountain View Books, located 2 blocks from Crawford's Hardware. Mr. Chun discovered similar evidence of nighttime surveillance when he opened his store on Friday morning, September 17th. Like Mrs. Crawford, he found fresh footprints beneath his front windows and noticed that his security light had been repositioned. Mountain View Books operates from a converted house built in 1934, with a covered front porch that serves as a reading area during warmer months. The porch contains several wooden chairs and small tables, where customers can browse books while enjoying views of the surrounding peaks. Mr. Chun had placed planters filled with late-season flowers along the porch railing, and these containers showed signs of disturbance that the footprints at Mountain View Books matched the size and tread pattern found at Crawford's Hardware. The same individual had apparently spent considerable time examining Mr. Chun's bookstore, standing at different positions along the front porch to observe the interior through the large windows that Mr. Chun had installed to create an inviting, well-lit shopping environment. Mr. Chun's security light had been rotated to shine across the street toward the Cedar Ridge Pharmacy, a small medical facility that served the town's residents and visiting hikers who occasionally needed treatment for minor injuries or altitude-related symptoms. The deliberate nature of the light repositioning suggested that the individual wanted to observe or illuminate the pharmacy building for reasons that were not immediately apparent. Inside Mountain View Books, Mr. Chun found no evidence of attempted entry or theft. His collection of regional hiking guides, local history books, and general fiction remained undisturbed. The small cash box he kept for daily transactions showed no signs of tampering, and the vintage cash register that served as both functional equipment and decorative element appeared exactly as he had left it the previous evening. Officer Morrison documented the second incident with the same thoroughness she had applied to Mrs. Crawford's report. She measured and photographed the footprints, noting that they corresponded precisely with those found at the hardware store. The positioning of the prints indicated that the individual had spent approximately 20 to 30 minutes examining the bookstore, moving systematically from window to window. The third report came from Ms. Sarah Mitchell, owner of Sunrise Cafe, located at the corner of Main Street and Pine Avenue. Ms. Mitchell opened her cafe each morning at 6 o'clock to serve breakfast to early hikers and local workers beginning their day. On Monday morning, September 20th, she discovered the now familiar signs of nighttime surveillance. Sunrise Cafe occupies the ground floor of a 2-story building constructed in 1948, with large windows along both the Main Street and Pine Avenue. ESM's Mitchell had decorated the window boxes with trailing ivy and seasonal flowers that created an attractive display while providing some privacy for diners seated near the windows. The footprints at Sunrise Cafe showed the same boot size and tread pattern as those found at the previous 2 locations. However, the positioning of the prints revealed a more extensive surveillance pattern. The individual had examined the cafe from multiple angles, spending time at windows on both sides of the building and apparently observing the interior from positions that provided different views of the dining area and kitchen. Ms. Mitchell's security light had been repositioned to illuminate the town library, a Carnegie building constructed in 1921 that served as both a repository for books and local historical documents and a community meeting space for various town organizations. The library's Gothic Revival architecture made it one of Cedar Ridge's most distinctive buildings, and its prominent position on Pine Avenue ensured visibility from multiple locations throughout the downtown area. The pattern of surveillance at Sunrise Cafe suggested a more thorough examination than had occurred at the previous locations. Officer Morrison's analysis of the footprint positioning indicated that the individual had spent over an hour observing the cafe, possibly waiting for specific activity or trying to understand the establishment's layout and routines. Ms. Mitchell reported that her cafe appeared completely undisturbed inside. The tables and chairs remained in their proper positions. The kitchen equipment showed no signs of tampering, and the cash register contained only the small amount of change she left overnight for making transactions the following morning. Her inventory of food supplies, coffee, and cafe merchandise appeared complete and properly stored. The fourth incident occurred at Henderson's General Store, reported by owner Mr. Frank Henderson on Thursday morning, September 23rd. Henderson's General Store has served Cedar Ridge since 1956, offering a combination of groceries, camping supplies, and everyday necessities that residents and visitors require in a mountain community without large retail establishments. The General Store occupies a long, narrow building with windows along the entire front facade, allowing natural light to illuminate the aisles of merchandise inside. Mr. Henderson had arranged seasonal displays in the front windows featuring camping gear, warm clothing, and other items needed as autumn weather brought cooler temperatures to the high elevation location. The familiar boot prints appeared beneath each window of Henderson's General Store, following the same systematic pattern observed at previous locations. The individual had examined the store from end to end, spending time at each window position and apparently studying the layout of merchandise in the store's organization. Mr. Henderson's security light had been repositioned to shine toward the town hall, a modest brick building constructed in 1963 that housed the municipal offices, meeting rooms for the town council, and a small police station where Officer Morrison and her colleagues worked. The town hall's position at the center of Cedar Ridge made it visible from most locations on Main Street. Inside Henderson's General Store, Mr. Henderson found the same absence of disturbance that characterized the previous incidents. Nothing had been stolen or moved, no attempt had been made to enter the building, and all merchandise remained properly displayed and accounted for. The systematic surveillance had occurred without any apparent criminal intent. Beyond the observation itself, Officer Morrison began developing a comprehensive analysis of the code, of the pattern emerging from these reports. She created a detailed map of downtown Cedar Ridge, marking each location where surveillance had occurred, and noting the direction each security light had been repositioned to illuminate. The pattern suggested a methodical examination of key businesses and municipal buildings throughout the town's commercial district. The timing of the incidents also revealed a pattern. Each surveillance episode had occurred on a weeknight when downtown activity would be minimal and the likelihood of encountering other people would be reduced. The individual appeared to be familiar with the town's routines and chose nights when their activities would be least likely to attract attention from residents or visitors. The positioning of the redirected security lights created a network of illumination that highlighted specific buildings throughout Cedar Ridge. The positioning of the redirected security lights created a network of illumination that highlighted specific buildings throughout Cedar Ridge. The positioning of the redirected security lights created a network of illumination that highlighted specific buildings throughout Cedar Ridge. Lights now shone toward the mountain outfitting shop, the pharmacy, the library, and the town hall. This selection of buildings represented different aspects of the community: recreation, healthcare, information, and government. The fifth report arrived from Mrs. Angela Torres, owner of Mountain Treasures, a gift shop specializing in local crafts, jewelry, and souvenirs purchased by visitors wanting to take home reminders of their time in Cedar Ridge. Mrs. Torres discovered the surveillance evidence on Monday morning, September 27th, when she arrived to open her store for the day. Mountain Treasures operates from a converted Victorian house built in 1889, one of Cedar Ridge's oldest surviving structures. The building features bay windows, decorative trim, and a wraparound porch that Mrs. Torres has furnished with rocking chairs and seasonal decorations that create an inviting atmosphere for browsing customers. Boot prints at Mountain Treasures followed the established pattern but showed additional detail due to the soft soil in Mrs. Torres's carefully maintained flower beds. Officer Morrison was able to identify specific wear patterns on the boot sole that would help distinguish these prints from footwear worn by other individuals. The tread showed unusual wear on the outer edge of the left boot, suggesting a slight irregularity in the person's gait. Mrs. Torres's security light had been repositioned to illuminate the Cedar Ridge Community Center, a modern building constructed in 1987 that served as a venue for town events, exercise classes, and social gatherings. The community center's large windows and open design made its interior easily observable from multiple exterior positions. The surveillance at Mountain Treasures appeared more detailed than at previous locations. The footprint pattern suggested that the individual had examined the gift shop from multiple angles and had spent considerable time observing the interior displays and layout. The person had also walked around the entire building, leaving prints along the side and rear of the structure. Mrs. Torres reported the same absence of criminal activity that characterized all previous incidents. Nothing was missing from her inventory of handmade crafts, local artwork, jewelry, or other merchandise. The cash register and credit card processing equipment remained secure, and no attempt had been made to enter the building or interfere with the alarm system. The sixth business to report nighttime surveillance was Pine Peak Sporting Goods, owned by Mr. Robert Kim. Mr. Kim discovered the evidence on Thursday morning, September 30th, when he arrived to prepare his store for the day's customers. Pine Peak Sporting Goods specializes in equipment for hiking, camping, fishing, and other outdoor activities popular in the Cedar Ridge area. Sporting Goods store occupies a modern building constructed in 1998, with large windows designed to display outdoor equipment and attract the attention of passing motorists and pedestrians. Mr. Kim had created window displays featuring hiking boots, backpacks, fishing gear, and camping equipment arranged to appeal to visitors planning outdoor adventures. The boot prints at Pine Peak Sporting Goods showed the same size and distinctive tread pattern as all previous incidents. The positioning of the prints revealed that the individual had examined each window display carefully, spending time studying the sporting goods inventory and possibly evaluating the store's security measures and layout. Mr. Kim's security light had been repositioned to illuminate the volunteer fire department, a single-story building that housed Cedar Ridge's fire truck, emergency medical equipment, and meeting room for the volunteer firefighters who served the mountain community. The fire department building occupied a strategic location that allowed quick response to emergencies throughout the town and surrounding mountain roads. Inside Pine Peak Sporting Goods, Mr. Kim found no evidence of attempted theft or disturbance. His expensive inventory of outdoor equipment remained properly secured and displayed. The store's electronic alarm system had not been triggered, and surveillance cameras positioned to monitor the interior of the store had not detected any unauthorized entry. Officer Morrison's investigation expanded to include examination of the buildings that had been illuminated by the repositioned security lights. She walked through downtown Cedar Ridge during evening hours, observing how the redirected lights created visibility of specific structures and considering what information someone might gather through systematic observation of these locations. Mountain Outfitting Shop, illuminated by Mrs. Crawford's repositioned lights, served customers planning extended hiking and climbing expeditions. The shop stocked specialized equipment for challenging mountain activities and maintained detailed maps of local trails and climbing routes. The pharmacy, highlighted by Mr. Chun's light, served not only routine medical needs, but also stocked medications and supplies needed for treating altitude sickness and outdoor-related injuries. The library, illuminated by Ms. Mitchell's security light, contained extensive collections of local history, property records, and regional information. The town hall, highlighted by Mr. Henderson's light, housed municipal records, meeting minutes, and administrative information about Cedar Ridge's government and planning activities. The community center illuminated by Mrs. Torres's light served as a gathering place where residents discussed local issues and organized community activities. The fire department building, highlighted by Mr. Kim's repositioned light, contained emergency response equipment and served as headquarters for volunteers who possessed detailed knowledge of local geography and emergency procedures. The systematic illumination of these specific buildings suggested that someone was gathering comprehensive information about Cedar Ridge's infrastructure and community organization. The seventh and final business surveillance incident was reported by Mr. James Walsh, owner of Cedar Ridge Auto Repair, on Monday morning, October 4th. Mr. Walsh's garage occupied a large metal building constructed in 1983 at the edge of the downtown area, where he serviced vehicles for local residents and visitors who experienced mechanical problems while traveling mountain roads. Cedar Ridge Auto Repair featured large bay doors that could accommodate multiple vehicles and extensive equipment for diagnosing and repairing automotive problems. Mr. Walsh had invested in modern diagnostic equipment that allowed him to service contemporary vehicles while maintaining the traditional tools needed for older cars and trucks still common in the mountain community. The boot prints at Cedar Ridge Auto Repair followed the established pattern but showed signs of more extensive surveillance than had occurred at previous locations. The individual had examined the garage from multiple positions and had spent time observing both the main work area and the office where Mr. Walsh conducted business with customers. Mr. Walsh's security light had been repositioned to illuminate the town's water treatment facility, a utilitarian building that housed equipment for processing and distributing water to Cedar Ridge residents and businesses. The water treatment facility represented critical infrastructure for the mountain community, which relied on local springs and wells for its water supply. Inside Cedar Ridge Auto Repair, Mr. Walsh found no evidence of theft or disturbance. His expensive automotive equipment remained secure, and no attempt had been made to access vehicles in the garage for repair. The office containing customer records and financial information appeared undisturbed, and the garage's security system had not detected any unauthorized entry. Officer Morrison compiled a comprehensive analysis of all 7 surveillance incidents, creating detailed documentation that revealed the systematic nature of the observations and the apparent intelligence-gathering purpose behind the activities. The pattern suggested that someone had conducted a thorough survey of Cedar Ridge's business district and key infrastructure, possibly in preparation for some future activity. The positioning of the redirected security lights created a network that illuminated recreational outfitters, medical facilities, information resources, government buildings, community gathering places, emergency services, and infrastructure systems. This comprehensive coverage suggested that the individual had developed a detailed understanding of how Cedar Ridge operated and what resources were available to residents and visitors. Asterisk. The timing of the surveillance activities, occurring over 3 weeks during September and early October, coincided with the peak autumn season when Cedar Ridge attracted its highest number of visitors for hiking and scenic viewing. The individual had conducted their observations during a period when increased activity in the town would provide cover for unfamiliar faces while still maintaining the weeknight schedule that minimized the risk of discovery. Officer Morrison's investigation revealed no additional incidents after October 4th. The systematic surveillance appeared to have concluded with the examination of Cedar Ridge Auto Repair and the illumination of the water treatment facility. The individual had completed their survey of the town's key businesses and infrastructure without triggering any security systems or committing any crimes beyond the technical trespass involved in approaching private buildings. The absence of theft, vandalism, or other criminal activity distinguished these incidents from typical surveillance that might precede burglaries or other crimes. The careful repositioning of security lights to illuminate specific buildings suggested a level of planning and intelligence gathering that extended beyond simple criminal opportunism. Officer Morrison coordinated with state police investigators who specialized in unusual criminal patterns. The systematic nature of the Cedar Ridge surveillance incidents generated interest from analysts who tracked activities that might indicate preparation for more serious crimes or organized criminal activity. State police records contained no similar patterns of systematic business surveillance in other mountain communities. The Cedar Ridge incidents appeared unique in their scope, organization, and apparent intelligence gathering purpose. Investigators found no evidence connecting the surveillance activities to any known criminal, organizations, or individuals with records of similar behavior. The investigation expanded to include analysis of visitor records from local hotels, camping facilities, and vacation rentals during the period when the surveillance occurred. Cedar Ridge's limited accommodation options meant that most visitors could be identified and contacted, though the process required coordination with multiple business owners and property managers. Hotel and camping facility records revealed normal patterns of autumn visitors during September and early October 2021. Most guests were families or couples interested in hiking and scenic activities typical for the season. No individuals stood out as suspicious or behaving in ways that suggested surveillance activities or unusual interest in local businesses. Vacation rental properties, increasingly popular in Cedar Ridge, presented more challenges for the investigation. Many rentals were booked through online platforms that provided limited information about guests, and property owners often had minimal contact with visitors beyond check-in and departure procedures. Officer Morrison interviewed property owners who managed vacation rentals during the surveillance period, requesting information about any guests who might have displayed unusual interest in downtown businesses or who had been observed walking through the commercial district during late evening hours. Mrs. Dorothy Sage, who managed 3 vacation rental properties, reported that one guest had mentioned particular interest in the town's history and infrastructure. The guest, a middle-aged man traveling alone, had asked detailed questions about Cedar Ridge's water system, emergency services, and local government organization. Mrs. Sage had assumed the questions reflected normal tourist curiosity about mountain community life. The guest had rented a small cabin on Maple Street for 2 weeks during late September, overlapping with the period when most surveillance activities occurred. Mrs. Sage provided the limited information she had about the rental, though the booking had been made through an online platform that required minimal identification verification. The rental cabin occupied a quiet location approximately half a mile from downtown Cedar Ridge, positioned where a guest could walk to Main Street businesses without attracting attention. The cabin's isolated setting would have provided privacy for someone who preferred to avoid contact with neighbors or other visitors. Officer Morrison examined the rental cabin after the guest's departure, finding evidence consistent with normal vacation use. The cabin showed no signs of unusual activity, though she discovered several detailed maps of Cedar Ridge and surrounding areas that suggested the guest had conducted thorough research about local geography and infrastructure. The maps included topographical details, road systems, and utility infrastructure markings that extended beyond normal tourist information. Some maps contained handwritten notes and markings that indicated careful study of emergency access routes, communication systems, and resource distribution throughout the Cedar Ridge area. Attempts to contact the guest through the online rental platform proved unsuccessful. The individual had used an email account that was no longer active, and the phone number provided during the booking process was disconnected. The payment method involved a prepaid credit card that could not be traced to specific identity information. The investigation reached a conclusion without identifying the individual responsible for the systematic surveillance or determining their specific purpose for gathering detailed information about Cedar Ridge. The pattern of activity suggested intelligence collection rather than preparation for traditional criminal activity. But no evidence indicated what use might be made of the information gathered. Officer Morrison prepared a comprehensive report documenting all aspects of the investigation, including detailed analysis of the surveillance pattern, physical evidence collected at each location, and potential connections between the activities and infrastructure vulnerability assessment. The report was distributed to regional law enforcement agencies and federal authorities responsible for monitoring activities that might affect small community security. The Cedar Ridge incident joined a growing collection of unusual patterns observed in rural and mountain communities across the region. While individual incidents rarely indicated significant threats, the accumulation of systematic surveillance activities suggested that someone or some organization was conducting comprehensive assessments of small-town infrastructure and emergency preparedness capabilities. Local business owners implemented enhanced security measures following the surveillance incidents, including improved lighting, security camera systems, and coordination with police for increased patrol coverage during nighttime hours. The community's response reflected both concern about the unexplained activities and determination to maintain the safe, welcoming environment that attracted residents and visitors to Cedar Ridge. The repositioned security lights were returned to their original positions, eliminating the network of illumination that had been created during the surveillance period. Business owners reported no further incidents of nighttime observation or security light tampering in the months following the investigation. Officer Morrison continued her routine patrols of downtown Cedar Ridge with increased attention to signs of unusual nighttime activity. The surveillance incidents had heightened awareness of potential vulnerabilities in the mountain community, while demonstrating the effectiveness of business owner vigilance and prompt reporting of suspicious activities. The case remained technically open pending any new developments or similar incidents in Cedar Ridge or surrounding communities. The thorough documentation of the surveillance pattern provided a foundation for recognizing related activities and responding more quickly to any resumed intelligence gathering efforts. The autumn visitor season concluded without further unusual incidents, and Cedar Ridge settled into its quieter winter routine when snow-covered mountain roads reduced tourist traffic and the community focused on serving its year-round residents. The unexplained surveillance activities became part of local memory, a reminder that even isolated mountain towns attracted attention from individuals whose purposes remained mysterious. Officer Morrison's morning routine returned to processing the typical overnight reports of minor incidents and routine police matters. The systematic surveillance that had occupied weeks of investigation and analysis had ended as mysteriously as it began, leaving detailed documentation but no definitive answers about who had conducted the observations or why Cedar Ridge had been selected for such thorough examination. The mountain peaks surrounding Cedar Ridge continued their eternal presence, unchanged by human activities in the valley below. The town's businesses resumed their normal routines, serving residents and visitors while maintaining the enhanced security awareness that had resulted from their shared experience of systematic surveillance. The case files documenting Cedar Ridge's unusual autumn remain stored in the police station, available for review by investigators who might discover connections to similar activities or develop new insights into the purpose behind the systematic business surveillance that had briefly transformed the quiet mountain community into the focus of unexplained intelligence gathering activities. Asterisk, the suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook stretches across gently rolling hills 20 minutes from the city center, where tree-lined streets connect modest homes built during the housing expansion of the 1980s. Each street follows the natural contours of the landscape, creating a network of curves and cul-de-sacs that gives the development its distinctive character and sense of privacy from the busier commercial areas nearby. Detective Sergeant Michael Torres has worked the Willowbrook beat for 6 years, responding to the typical concerns of suburban life: occasional property disputes between neighbors, minor traffic violations on residential streets, and periodic reports of suspicious activity that usually involve unfamiliar service vehicles or delivery drivers navigating the winding neighborhood roads. During the spring months of 2020, Detective Torres began receiving an unusual number of reports from Willowbrook residents about vehicle sightings that seemed to follow a pattern. Multiple residents on Maple Grove Avenue contacted the police department to report the same unfamiliar vehicle appearing repeatedly near their street, always during evening hours and always parked in positions that allowed observation of residential activity. The first report came from Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, who lived at 247 Maple Grove Avenue in a split-level house surrounded by mature oak trees that provided natural privacy screening from neighboring properties. Mrs. Hendricks contacted police on Tuesday evening, April 14th, to report that a dark-colored sedan had been parked across from her house for approximately 30 minutes that evening. Mrs. Hendricks had noticed the vehicle while preparing dinner in her kitchen, which featured a large window overlooking the front yard and street. The sedan was positioned near the intersection of Maple Grove Avenue and Birch Lane, approximately 50 yards from her house, but with a clear view of her driveway, front entrance, and the large picture window of her living room. The vehicle appeared to be a mid-size sedan, dark blue or black in color, with tinted windows that prevented observation of the interior or occupants. Mrs. Hendricks noted that the car's position allowed surveillance of several houses along her section of Maple Grove Avenue, including her own property and those of her immediate neighbors. Mrs. Hendricks observed the sedan from her kitchen window for approximately 20 minutes before it departed. The vehicle left slowly, traveling north on Maple Grove Avenue toward the neighborhood's main entrance. No occupants were visible during the departure, and the car's license plate was not clearly readable from Mrs. Hendricks's viewing position. Detective Torres responded to Mrs. Hendricks's call by conducting an evening patrol of Maple Grove Avenue and surrounding streets. He found no unusual vehicles parked in the area and observed normal residential activity consistent with a typical weeknight in Willowbrook. His patrol notes documented the time and location of Mrs. Hendricks's report for reference in case similar incidents occurred. The second report arrived 3 days later from Mr. James Morrison, who lived at 312 Maple Grove Avenue, approximately 4 blocks from Mrs. Hendricks's house. Mr. Morrison contacted police on Friday evening, April 17th, to report that the same type of dark sedan had been parked near his property for approximately 45 minutes earlier that evening. Mr. Morrison's house occupied a corner lot where Maple Grove Avenue intersected with Cedar Court, providing the occupant of a parked vehicle with views of multiple residential streets and several houses. The sedan had been positioned on Cedar Court, approximately 60 yards from Mr. Morrison's front door, but with clear sight lines to his driveway and the large windows of his family room. Mr. Morrison had first noticed the vehicle while retrieving mail from his mailbox at the end of his driveway. The sedan's position immediately struck him as unusual because Cedar Court was a dead-end street that served only 5 houses, and he was familiar with all vehicles normally parked in that area. The unfamiliar sedan appeared out of place and served no obvious purpose related to visiting any of the nearby residences. Upon returning to his house, Mr. Morrison observed the sedan from his living room window for approximately 30 minutes. The vehicle remained stationary with its engine running, evidenced by occasional exhaust visible in the cool April air. No occupants entered or exited the vehicle during his observation period, and no legitimate reason for the extended parking became apparent. Mr. Morrison attempted to note the sedan's license plate number, but found that the angle and distance made accurate reading impossible. The vehicle appeared to match Mrs. Hendricks's description of a dark-colored, mid-size sedan with tinted windows. The car departed when Mr. Morrison moved to a different window that would have provided a clearer view of the license plate area. Detective Torres responded to Mr. Morrison's report by expanding his evening patrols to include Cedar Court and adjacent streets. He noted the strategic positioning of the reported parking location, which provided surveillance capability for multiple residential properties while maintaining distance that would make identification of the vehicle's occupants difficult for residents. The third report came from Mrs. Susan Chun, who lived at 428 Maple Grove Avenue, located between the areas where the previous two sightings had occurred. Mrs. Chun contacted police on Monday evening, April 20th, to report that a dark sedan, matching the previous descriptions, had been parked near her house for over an hour that afternoon. Mrs. Chun's property featured a long driveway that curved around mature landscaping before reaching the house, which was set back approximately 100 feet from the street. The positioning provided privacy for the residents but also meant that Mrs. Chun had limited visibility of street activity from inside her house. Mrs. Chun had discovered the parked sedan when she left her house to walk her golden retriever, Buddy, along their usual route through the neighborhood. The vehicle was positioned on Maple Grove Avenue directly across from her driveway entrance, in a location that provided clear observation of anyone entering or leaving her property. The sedan's occupant appeared to be a single individual, though Mrs. Chun could not determine gender or other identifying characteristics due to the vehicle's tinted windows and the distance from her position on the sidewalk. She noted that the person in the car appeared to be holding something near the steering wheel, possibly a phone or small electronic device. Mrs. Chun completed her walk with Buddy, following their normal route that took approximately 25 minutes to complete. When she returned to Maple Grove Avenue, the sedan was still parked in the same location. She observed the vehicle from her front yard while Buddy explored the landscaping around their house, noting that the occupant remained in the driver's seat throughout this period. Concerned about the extended surveillance of her property, Mrs. Chun approached the sedan to inquire about the driver's purpose in the neighborhood. As she walked across the street toward the vehicle, the driver immediately started the engine and departed quickly, heading south on Maple Grove Avenue toward the neighborhood's secondary exit. Mrs. Chun was able to observe that the sedan appeared to be occupied by a single adult, though specific details about the individual remained unclear due to the quick departure and window tinting. She noted that the vehicle bore in-state license plates, but could not read the specific numbers or letters before the car disappeared around a curve in the road. Detective Torres interviewed Mrs. Chun the following day, documenting her detailed observations and noting the escalation in the vehicle occupant's surveillance behavior. The extended parking time and apparent use of electronic devices suggested more systematic observation than casual or coincidental presence in the neighborhood. The fourth report was submitted by Mr. David Park, who lived at 156 Maple Grove Avenue, near the neighborhood's main entrance. Mr. Park contacted police on Thursday evening, April 23rd, to report that he had observed the dark sedan on multiple occasions over the past week, always positioned where the occupant could observe residential activity along his section of the street. Mr. Park's house sat on a slight elevation that provided him with excellent views of Maple Grove Avenue in both directions. From his living room and dining room windows, he could observe vehicle traffic and pedestrian activity along a quarter-mile stretch of the street, making him an ideal witness for detecting unusual or repeated vehicle presence. Mr. Park reported that he had observed the sedan on at least 4 separate occasions during the previous week, always during evening hours between 5:30 and 7 o'clock. The vehicle had been parked in different locations along Maple Grove Avenue, but each position provided surveillance capability for multiple residential properties while maintaining sufficient distance to avoid easy identification. Sedan's parking locations included positions near the intersections with Oak Street, Pine Lane, and Elm Court, creating a pattern that suggested systematic observation of different sections of Maple Grove Avenue. Mr. Park noted that the vehicle never parked in the same location twice during his observations, indicating deliberate variation in surveillance positions that Mr. Park had attempted to photograph. the sedan during one of his observations, using a telephoto lens attached to his camera equipment. However, the vehicle departed immediately when he appeared at his window with the camera, suggesting that the occupant was actively monitoring for signs of attention or documentation from residents. The photograph Mr. Park managed to capture before the Ford sedan's departure showed a dark blue or black four-door sedan with tinted windows and standard state license plates. The image quality was insufficient to determine the license plate number, but the photograph confirmed the vehicle. Descriptions provided by other residents. Detective Torres analyzed Mr. Park's observations and recognized that the systematic nature of the vehicle's surveillance indicated organized intelligence gathering rather than casual criminal activity. The variation in parking locations and the occupants' awareness of resident attention suggested experience with surveillance techniques and concern about detection. The fifth report came from Mrs. Angela Foster, who lived at 890 Maple Grove Avenue, near the neighborhood's secondary entrance on the opposite end from Mr. Park's location. Mrs. Foster contacted police on Sunday afternoon, April 26th, to report that the dark sedan had expanded its surveillance pattern to include her section of the neighborhood. Mrs. Foster's house occupied a corner lot where Maple Grove Avenue curved to connect with Willowbrook Drive, the neighborhood's secondary access road. The positioning provided her with views of traffic entering and leaving the neighborhood through this secondary entrance, complementing Mr. Park's observations of activity near the main entrance. Mrs. Foster had observed the sedan parked on Willowbrook Drive, approximately 100 yards from her house, but positioned to observe the intersection and monitor traffic patterns through the secondary entrance. The vehicle's location suggested that the occupant was studying not only individual residential properties, but also the neighborhood's overall layout and access points. The sedan remained parked on Willowbrook Drive for approximately 50 minutes during Mrs. Foster's observation period. She noted that the occupant appeared to be taking notes or making recordings based on periodic movement visible through the front windshield. The individual also appeared to use electronic devices, possibly a phone or tablet. During the surveillance session, Mrs. Foster observed the sedan's departure and noted that the vehicle exited the neighborhood through the main entrance on Maple Grove Avenue rather than using the nearby secondary entrance. This routing suggested that the occupant was familiar with both access points and chose to vary their departure route, possibly to avoid establishing predictable patterns. Detective Torres coordinated with Mrs. Foster to establish a communication protocol for reporting future sightings of the sedan. Her position near the secondary entrance made her an important observer for detecting continued surveillance activity and understanding the full scope of the vehicle's presence in Willowbrook. The sixth report arrived from Mr. Robert Kim, who lived at 534 Maple Grove Avenue, located in the central portion of the neighborhood where several residential streets intersected. Mr. Kim contacted police on Wednesday evening, April 29th, to report that he had observed the dark sedan parked in positions that provided surveillance of multiple streets. Simultaneously, Mr. Kim's property was situated where Maple Grove Avenue intersected with Spruce Lane and Aspen Way, creating a junction that served as a central hub for neighborhood traffic. The location allowed observation of residents traveling between different sections of Willowbrook and provided insight into the community's daily activity patterns. Mr. Kim reported that the sedan had been parked at the intersection for approximately 1 hour during the early evening hours. The vehicle's position allowed the occupant to observe traffic on 3 different streets while maintaining distance from any specific residential property. This positioning suggested intelligence gathering focused on neighborhood-wide activity rather than surveillance of individual houses. The sedan's occupant appeared to be documenting observations systematically, based on Mr. Kim's observation of regular activity inside the vehicle. The individual periodically used what appeared to be a tablet or laptop computer, suggesting more sophisticated data collection than simple visual observation. Mr. Kim attempted to approach the sedan on foot to inquire about the driver's purpose in the neighborhood. As he walked across the intersection toward the vehicle, the occupant immediately departed, accelerating quickly along Spruce Lane toward the neighborhood's interior rather than heading directly to either entrance. The sedan's route through the neighborhood's interior streets suggested that the occupant was familiar with Willowbrook's layout and could navigate the winding roads without difficulty. This familiarity indicated either extensive prior reconnaissance or access to detailed mapping information about the subdivision street network. Detective Torres expanded his investigation to include analysis of the sedan's observed routes and parking locations. He created a detailed map of Willowbrook showing each reported sighting location and identified patterns in the surveillance activities that suggested systematic intelligence collection focused on understanding the neighborhood's infrastructure and resident activity. Seventh report was submitted by Mrs. Helen Martinez, who lived at 723 Maple Grove Avenue, in a section of the neighborhood characterized by larger lots and houses set back further from the street. Mrs. Martinez contacted police on Saturday morning, May 2nd, to report that she had observed the dark sedan conducting surveillance of her area during dawn hours. Mrs. Martinez had discovered the sedan while leaving for an early morning jogging routine that she followed each weekend. The vehicle was parked on Maple Grove Avenue near the intersection with Willow Court, positioned to observe several houses including her own property. The early morning timing represented a departure from the evening surveillance pattern reported by other residents. The sedan's presence during dawn hours suggested that the occupant was expanding their observation schedule to gather information about neighborhood activity patterns throughout different times of day. Mrs. Martinez noted that the vehicle appeared to be documenting morning routines of residents who left for work early or engaged in weekend recreational activities. Mrs. Martinez observed the sedan for approximately 15 minutes before beginning her jogging route. The vehicle remained stationary during this period, with the occupant appearing to take notes or operate electronic devices. The individual showed no reaction to Mrs. Martinez's presence, suggesting either confidence in their surveillance activities or lack of concern about resident awareness. When Mrs. Martinez returned from her 30-minute jogging route, the sedan had departed. She found no evidence of the vehicle's presence in other parts of the neighborhood during her run, indicating that the occupant had left Willowbrook entirely rather than relocating to another surveillance position. Detective Torres recognized that the expansion of surveillance activities to include dawn hours represented an escalation in the systematic observation of Willowbrook. The comprehensive timing suggested that the occupant was developing detailed intelligence about resident schedules, activity patterns, and neighborhood security awareness. The eighth and most detailed report came from Mr. Thomas Walsh, who lived at 445 Maple Grove Avenue, in a house positioned to provide excellent observation capability along a straight section of the street. Mr. Walsh contacted police on Tuesday evening, May 5th, to report that he had observed the dark sedan conducting what appeared to be coordinated surveillance with a second vehicle. Mr. Walsh's house featured large front windows and a covered porch that allowed discreet observation of street activity. His position on a straight section of Maple Grove Avenue provided clear sight lines extending several hundred yards in both directions, making him an ideal witness for detecting vehicle movements and coordination between multiple surveillance units. Mr. Walsh reported that he had observed the familiar dark sedan parked near the intersection with Hickory Lane, maintaining the established pattern of positioning for residential observation. However, approximately 20 minutes after the sedan's arrival, a second vehicle appeared and parked approximately 2 blocks away. near the intersection with Dogwood Court. The second vehicle was described as a light-colored SUV, possibly white or silver, with standard factory tinting that was less concealing than the sedan's darker window treatment. The SUV's positioning created surveillance, coverage of a different section of Maple Grove Avenue while maintaining communication distance with the sedan. Mr. Walsh observed apparent coordination between the two vehicles through periodic movement of occupants and what appeared to be electronic communication. The individuals in both vehicles appeared to use handheld devices, possibly radios or mobile phones, for maintaining contact during their surveillance activities. Coordinated surveillance continued for approximately 90 minutes, with both vehicles maintaining their respective positions while documenting neighborhood activity. Mr. Walsh noted increased electronic activity in both vehicles during periods when residents were arriving home from work or engaging in evening activities such as dog walking or yard work. The surveillance session concluded when both vehicles departed simultaneously, with the sedan exiting through Willowbrook's main entrance while the SUV used the secondary entrance. The coordinated departure suggested planned logistics and familiarity with neighborhood access points and traffic patterns. Detective Torres recognized that the introduction of a second surveillance vehicle represented a significant escalation in the intelligence gathering activities targeting Willowbrook. The coordination between multiple units suggested organized surveillance capabilities beyond individual criminal activity or casual observation. The ninth report arrived from Mrs. Dorothy Sage, who lived at 612 Maple Grove Avenue, near a section of the neighborhood where newer construction had created larger houses with extensive landscaping. Mrs. Sage contacted police on Friday afternoon, May 8th, to report that she had observed both the sedan and SUV conducting surveillance while a third individual on foot examined neighborhood infrastructure. Mrs. Sage's property was positioned where she could observe both vehicular and pedestrian activity along Maple Grove Avenue and adjacent streets. Her observations revealed the most comprehensive surveillance operation yet reported, involving multiple individuals and different observation methods. Mrs. Sage reported that the dark sedan and light SUV had taken positions near intersections with Cottonwood Lane and Redwood Drive, creating surveillance coverage of a central section of the neighborhood. While the vehicles maintained their observation posts, a third individual dressed in casual clothing had walked through the area, apparently examining utility infrastructure and neighborhood security features. Pedestrian surveillance individual had been observed examining electrical utility boxes, storm drain access points, and street lighting installations. The person carried what appeared to be a small tablet or electronic device and took photographs of various infrastructure elements using a mobile phone. Mrs. Sage noted that the pedestrian coordinator appeared to communicate with the vehicle occupants through hand signals or electronic devices. The individual's route through the neighborhood followed a systematic pattern that suggested familiarity with utility layouts and municipal infrastructure organization. The coordinated surveillance session involving vehicles and pedestrian observation continued for over 2 hours, representing the most extensive intelligence gathering activity yet reported in Willowbrook. The operation concluded with all participants departing simultaneously through different neighborhood exits. Detective Torres coordinated with municipal utility companies and infrastructure maintenance contractors to determine whether any legitimate survey or inspection activities were scheduled in Willowbrook during the surveillance period. No authorized infrastructure assessment activities were found that would explain the observed examination of utility installations. The 10th and final report in the series came from Mr. Frank Henderson, who lived at 889 Maple Grove Avenue, near the neighborhood's boundary with adjacent commercial development. Mr. Henderson contacted police on Monday evening, May 11th, to report that the surveillance activities had expanded to include observation from outside Willowbrook's residential boundaries. Mr. Henderson's house was positioned where he could observe both Willowbrook's interior streets and the commercial parking areas that bordered the neighborhood. His unique vantage point allowed detection of surveillance activities based in locations that previous residents could not observe. Mr. Henderson reported that surveillance vehicles had been positioned in the parking lot of a shopping center adjacent to Willowbrook, where they could observe neighborhood entrances and traffic patterns without parking on residential streets. The elevated position of the commercial area provided extensive surveillance capability while reducing the risk of detection by residents. The shopping center surveillance involved both the familiar sedan and SUV, along with a third vehicle described as a dark pickup truck. The three vehicles were positioned at different locations within the commercial parking area, creating comprehensive observation coverage of Willowbrook's perimeter and access points. Mr. Henderson observed the vehicles using telephoto cameras and electronic equipment that appeared more sophisticated than the devices noted in previous surveillance activities. The occupants appeared to be documenting traffic patterns, resident schedules, and neighborhood security measures with professional-level equipment and methodology. The commercial area surveillance continued for approximately 3 hours, representing the longest continuous observation session yet reported. The operation concluded with all three vehicles departing in different directions, avoiding the creation of a convoy that might attract attention from commercial area security or law enforcement patrols. Detective Torres completed his comprehensive analysis of the Willowbrook surveillance pattern by creating detailed documentation of all reported incidents, mapping surveillance locations and timing, and identifying escalation patterns in the intelligence gathering activities. His investigation revealed systematic reconnaissance that progressed from individual vehicle observation to coordinated multi-unit operations. Surveillance patterns showed progressive sophistication, beginning with single vehicle observation of individual properties and expanding to include coordinated surveillance, pedestrian reconnaissance, infrastructure examination, and external observation from commercial areas. The escalation suggested organized planning and substantial resources dedicated to gathering comprehensive intelligence about Willowbrook. The timing of surveillance activities revealed careful attention to resident schedules and neighborhood activity patterns. Initial observations focused on evening hours when residents were most likely to be at home and engaged in routine activities. Later surveillance expanded to include morning hours and weekend periods, suggesting development of detailed understanding of community schedules. The geographic pattern of surveillance locations indicated systematic coverage of the entire neighborhood, with particular attention to intersections, entrance points, and areas that provided observation of multiple residential properties simultaneously. The progression suggested methodical intelligence collection designed to understand Willowbrook's layout, security measures, and resident behavior patterns. Detective Torres coordinated with regional law enforcement agencies to determine whether similar surveillance patterns had been reported in other suburban communities. His inquiry revealed that Willowbrook's experience was part of a broader pattern of organized reconnaissance activities targeting residential neighborhoods throughout the metropolitan area. Similar surveillance operations had been documented in 5 other suburban developments during the same time period, each following comparable patterns of systematic observation, coordination between multiple vehicles, and escalation to include infrastructure examination. The regional pattern suggested organized intelligence collection targeting suburban community security and emergency preparedness capabilities. Federal authorities responsible for monitoring activities that might affect community security were notified about the Willowbrook surveillance pattern and its connection to similar operations in other neighborhoods. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection generated interest from agencies responsible For assessing threats to residential community safety, the investigation's conclusion documented comprehensive surveillance activities that appeared designed to gather detailed intelligence about Willowbrook's infrastructure, resident patterns, security measures, and emergency response capabilities. The operation's sophistication and coordination suggested organized planning rather than individual criminal activity. Willowbrook residents were provided with security recommendations, including enhanced attention to suspicious vehicle activity, coordination with neighbors for reporting unusual observations, and implementation of improved residential security measures. The community response emphasized vigilance while maintaining the welcoming character that attracted residents to the neighborhood. Enhanced police patrols of Willowbrook were implemented following the investigation, with particular attention to detecting surveillance activities and monitoring for signs of continued intelligence collection. The patrol schedule included varied timing and routing designed to identify any resumed reconnaissance operations. The surveillance activities documented in Willowbrook ceased following the investigation's conclusion, though whether this resulted from detection of the intelligence collection or completion of the reconnaissance objectives remained unclear. No further incidents of systematic vehicle surveillance were reported by residents in subsequent months. Detective Torres maintained regular contact with Willowbrook residents who had reported surveillance activities, establishing a network for rapid detection and response to any renewed intelligence collection efforts. The community's experience had created heightened awareness of security issues while strengthening cooperation between residents and local law enforcement. Case files documenting Willowbrook's surveillance incidents were maintained as active investigations pending any developments that might explain the purpose of the intelligence collection or identify the individuals and organizations responsible for the systematic reconnaissance activities. The suburban streets of Willowbrook returned to their normal patterns of residential activity, with residents maintaining increased awareness of vehicle activity while resuming the daily routines that define their community life. The systematic surveillance that had transformed their neighborhood into the focus of organized intelligence collection remained a mystery that exemplified the complex security challenges facing contemporary suburban communities. The railway town of Millbrook exists because of the tracks that cut through its heart, carrying freight trains and passenger services between major cities while creating the steady rhythm that has defined community life for over a century. The depot building, constructed in 1923 from red brick and limestone trim, serves as both transportation hub and unofficial town center where residents gather to observe the daily parade of rail traffic. Station Master Rebecca Walsh oversees the depot operations during the day shift, managing passenger services, freight coordination, and the various administrative duties that keep Millbrook connected to the broader rail network. She has worked for the railway company for 15 years, following her father, who served as a conductor on this route for 32 years before retirement. The depot maintains detailed records of all rail traffic, passenger manifests, freight inventories, and incident reports as required by federal transportation regulations. These archives occupy several filing cabinets in the station office, where decades of carefully documented railway operations create a comprehensive history of Millbrook's role in the regional transportation system. During the autumn of 2018, Station Master Walsh began encountering unusual reports involving unattended luggage and silent witnesses that created patterns difficult to explain through normal railway operations. These incidents shared common elements that suggested systematic activity rather than the random occurrences typically associated with busy transportation facilities. The first unusual report was filed on Thursday morning, October 11th, when maintenance worker Frank Morrison discovered an abandoned suitcase on Platform B during his routine pre-dawn inspection of the depot facilities. The suitcase appeared new and expensive, positioned carefully beside the platform. Bench where passengers waited for the southbound morning service. Platform B served the less frequently used southbound route that carried passengers to smaller communities along the rail line. The platform typically accommodated fewer than 20 passengers per day, making abandoned luggage more noticeable than it would be on the busier northbound platform that handled commuter traffic to the metropolitan area. The suitcase was medium-sized, black leather with brass fittings, and appeared to contain substantial weight based on Frank Morrison's attempt to move it during his platform inspection. No identification tags were attached to the luggage, and no passengers were present on Platform B during the early morning hours when the discovery was made. Station Master Walsh examined the abandoned suitcase according to established protocols for unattended luggage at transportation facilities. The exterior showed no signs of damage or tampering, and no unusual sounds or odors suggested dangerous contents. The luggage appeared to be standard travel equipment that might belong to any passenger using rail services. Railway security procedures required that unattended luggage be reported to law enforcement and removed from passenger areas pending identification of the owner. Station Master Walsh contacted the Millbrook Police Department and arranged for secure storage of the suitcase in the Fayette Depot's locked luggage room pending investigation. Officer David Chun arrived at the depot within 30 minutes to examine the abandoned luggage and interview Station Master Walsh about the circumstances of its discovery. The suitcase was photographed in its original position before being moved to secure storage, and detailed documentation was prepared for the incident report. The suitcase remained unclaimed for 72 hours, after which railway protocols permitted opening the luggage to search for identification information. Station Master Walsh and Officer Chun opened the suitcase together in the presence of Depot Supervisor Margaret Collins, who witnessed the examination for administrative purposes. The suitcase contained men's clothing, toiletries, and personal items consistent with business travel or short-term tourism. The clothing appeared new and unused, with manufacturer tags still attached to several items. No personal identification documents, business cards, or other materials provided information about the suitcase's owner. Among the contents were several items that seemed unusual for typical travel purposes: detailed railway timetables for multiple regional routes, topographical maps of areas served by the rail network, and a small notebook containing handwritten observations about depot facilities and security procedures at various stations. The notebook contained detailed descriptions of depot layouts, platform configurations, security measures, and operational procedures at over a dozen railway stations throughout the region. The observations were written in precise, technical language that suggested familiarity with transportation, security, and facility management. The maps found in the suitcase showed railway routes with hand-drawn markings, indicating elevation changes, bridge locations, tunnel positions, and areas where tracks crossed major highways or waterways. The level of detail suggested specialized knowledge of railway engineering and infrastructure vulnerability. Assessment. Station Master Walsh recognized several of the facilities described in the notebook from her experience working at different depots during her career with the railway company. The observations were accurate and detailed, indicating that someone had conducted systematic surveillance of multiple transportation facilities. Officer Chun documented the suitcase contents and initiated an investigation to determine the identity of the owner and the purpose for which the intelligence materials had been gathered. The systematic nature of the railway facility documentation suggested organized reconnaissance rather than casual tourist interest. The second unusual incident occurred 6 days later when platform attendant James Foster observed a passenger exhibiting behavior that seemed inconsistent with normal travel purposes. The individual had purchased a ticket for the northbound morning service but spent the entire waiting period documenting depot operations rather than preparing for departure. The passenger was a middle-aged man wearing business attire appropriate for professional travel. He carried a small briefcase and appeared to be conducting legitimate business travel, though his activities on the platform suggested interests beyond simple transportation from one location to another. James Foster observed the passenger taking detailed notes about platform procedures, security measures, and operational timing. The individual appeared particularly interested in freight operations, staff schedules, and communication systems used for coordinating train movements and depot activities. When the northbound train arrived, the passenger boarded, but left behind a small notebook that had apparently fallen from his briefcase during the boarding process. James Foster discovered the notebook after the train's departure and brought it to Station Master Walsh for handling according to lost property procedures. The notebook contained observations similar to those found in the abandoned suitcase, with detailed descriptions of depot facilities, operational procedures, and security measures. The handwriting appeared different from that in the first notebook, suggesting that multiple individuals were conducting systematic documentation of railway operations. Station Master Walsh compared the two notebooks and identified common elements in the information being collected. Both sets of observations focused on security procedures, communication systems, freight handling operations, and facility layouts that would be important for understanding transportation infrastructure vulnerabilities. The passenger who had left the notebook could not be contacted because he had paid for his ticket with cash and provided no identification information beyond what was required for the journey. The ticket purchase records showed only a destination, station, but no personal details that would allow follow-up contact. The third incident involved silent witness reports from multiple community members who had observed individuals conducting apparent surveillance of railway operations from locations outside the depot property. These observers were positioned where they could document train schedules, cargo manifests, and security procedures without attracting attention from depot staff. Mrs. Dorothy Henley, who operated a small cafe across from the depot, reported that she had observed the same individual on multiple occasions sitting at her counter for extended periods while taking notes about railway activities. The person ordered minimal food and drink, but remained for hours while documenting train movements and depot operations. The individual appeared to be creating detailed records of train schedules, freight car configurations, and crew change procedures. Mrs. Henley noted that the person's attention was focused entirely on railway operations rather than enjoying the cafe's food or engaging in normal customer behavior. Mr. Thomas Brewster, who owned the auto repair shop adjacent to the railway corridor, reported similar observations of individuals documenting train operations from his parking lot. These observers appeared at different times and appeared to be working independently, though their activities suggested coordinated intelligence collection. Observers documented information about freight car contents, train crew procedures, security measures, and communication systems used for coordinating railway operations. Mr. Brewster noted that the individuals appeared knowledgeable about railway operations and focused their observations on specific aspects of depot and train management. Mrs. Angela Price, who lived in a house overlooking the railway corridor, reported that she had observed individuals using telephoto cameras to photograph train operations from concealed positions along the tracks. These photographers appeared during both day and night hours, suggesting systematic documentation of railway activities across different operational periods. The photographic surveillance included documentation of train configurations, crew procedures, cargo handling operations, and security measures employed at the depot. Mrs. Price noted that the photographers appeared to coordinate their activities with train schedules, suggesting advanced knowledge of railway timetables and operational planning. Station Master Walsh compiled these community reports and recognized that the depot was the focus of systematic intelligence collection involving multiple individuals using different observation methods. The pattern suggested organized reconnaissance rather than casual interest in railway operations. The fourth significant incident occurred when freight supervisor Robert Kim discovered that someone had been examining cargo manifests and freight car contents during overnight hours when the depot was closed to passenger services. Evidence of this surveillance was found during routine morning inspection of the freight handling areas. The freight yard contained several security cameras that recorded loading and unloading operations, but the surveillance equipment had been disabled during the overnight period when the unauthorized examination occurred. The cameras were repositioned to face away from the freight areas and were later returned to their normal positions. Footprints in the gravel around freight cars indicated that someone had examined multiple rail cars containing different types of cargo. The individual had accessed freight manifests stored in the depot office and had apparently photographed or copied information about cargo contents and destinations. The unauthorized access required detailed knowledge of depot security procedures and freight handling operations. The individual had avoided triggering alarm systems and had gained access to restricted areas without damaging locks or security barriers, suggesting either inside knowledge or sophisticated technical capabilities. Station Master Walsh contacted Railway Security Headquarters to report the unauthorized access to freight operations and request investigation by specialized transportation security personnel. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection and the technical sophistication involved suggested threats beyond local law enforcement capabilities. Railway Security Inspector Margaret Collins arrived at Millbrook the following day to conduct a comprehensive assessment of depot security and investigate the pattern of surveillance activities. Inspector Collins specialized in transportation, infrastructure protection, and had experience with organized reconnaissance targeting railway facilities. Inspector Collins examined all evidence collected from the previous incidents and interviewed depot staff, community members, and law enforcement personnel who had documented unusual activities. Her analysis confirmed that Millbrook Depot was the target of systematic intelligence collection by organized individuals with substantial resources and technical capabilities. The investigation expanded to include coordination with federal authorities responsible for transportation security and infrastructure protection. The pattern of railway facility reconnaissance identified at Millbrook was consistent with intelligence collection activities that had been observed at other transportation hubs throughout the region. Similar surveillance operations had been documented at freight yards, passenger stations, and maintenance facilities along multiple railway routes. The systematic nature of the reconnaissance suggested organized planning focused on understanding transportation infrastructure vulnerabilities and operational procedures. Federal transportation security analysts identified Millbrook Depot as part of a critical railway corridor that connected major industrial areas with port facilities and military installations. The intelligence collection targeting this route suggested potential interest in disrupting transportation networks that supported economic and security activities. The investigation revealed that the reconnaissance activities had been conducted by individuals with detailed knowledge of railway operations and security procedures. The technical sophistication of their surveillance methods and their ability to access restricted areas suggested either insider assistance or substantial training in transportation infrastructure assessment. Enhanced security measures were implemented at Millbrook Depot following the investigation, including upgraded surveillance systems, increased security patrols, and improved access controls for freight handling areas. Depot staff received additional training in detecting and reporting suspicious activities. Community members who had reported surveillance activities were provided with contact information for reporting future observations and were integrated into an informal network for monitoring railway corridor security. Their observations had provided crucial intelligence for understanding the scope and methods of the reconnaissance operations. The abandoned luggage and notebooks containing railway facility intelligence were retained as evidence for the ongoing investigation. Analysis of the materials provided insights into the systematic methods used for collecting information about transportation infrastructure and security procedures. Station Master Walsh implemented enhanced procedures for monitoring passenger activities and identifying individuals who exhibited unusual interest in depot operations or railway infrastructure. Depot staff were trained to recognize surveillance behaviors and report suspicious activities to security personnel. The investigation identified connections between the Millbrook surveillance activities and similar operations, targeting transportation facilities throughout the regional railway network. The coordinated nature of the intelligence collection suggested substantial resources and organization focused on understanding transportation infrastructure vulnerabilities. Enhanced coordination was established between railway security, local law enforcement, and federal agencies responsible for transportation infrastructure protection. This coordination created improved capabilities for detecting and responding to organized reconnaissance activities targeting critical transportation assets. The railway corridor through Millbrook remained operational with normal passenger and freight services while implementing the enhanced security measures developed during the investigation. The community's awareness of potential security threats was balanced with maintaining the transportation services essential for local economic activity. Periodic security assessments were scheduled to evaluate the effectiveness of enhanced protection measures and identify any resumed surveillance activities. The comprehensive documentation of the original reconnaissance operations provided a foundation for recognizing similar intelligence collection efforts. The depot archives were expanded to include detailed records of all security incidents and suspicious activities reported by staff and community members. This documentation created a comprehensive database for analyzing patterns and identifying potential threats to railway operations. Coordination with other transportation facilities along the railway network provided early warning capabilities for detecting organized surveillance operations that might target multiple locations systematically. Shared intelligence helped identify reconnaissance patterns before they could develop into more serious security threats. Station Master Walsh continued her daily oversight of depot operations with enhanced awareness of security considerations while maintaining the efficient transportation services that connected Millbrook to the broader rail network. The investigation had strengthened depot security without disrupting the rail operations essential for community life. The red brick depot building continued to serve its century-long role as Millbrook's connection to distant cities and economic opportunities. The steady rhythm of arriving and departing trains remained unchanged, though enhanced security awareness reflected the complex challenges facing contemporary transportation infrastructure. The archives documenting railway operations at Millbrook Depot grew to include comprehensive records of security, incidents, and surveillance activities alongside the traditional documentation of passenger services and freight operations. These records provided historical perspective on the evolution of transportation security challenges in small railway communities. The community's experience with organized surveillance of railway infrastructure became part of local memory and ongoing security awareness. Residents maintained vigilance for suspicious activities while preserving the welcoming character that made Millbrook an attractive place for visitors traveling the railway corridors. The investigation files remained active pending any developments that might explain the ultimate purpose of the intelligence collection or identify additional reconnaissance activities targeting transportation infrastructure. The thorough documentation provided resources for future security assessments and threat analysis. Regular coordination meetings between railway security, local law enforcement, and community representatives ensured continued awareness of potential security challenges while maintaining effective transportation services. The collaborative approach balanced security considerations with the operational requirements of railway commerce and passenger travel. The freight trains and passenger services that defined Millbrook's existence continued their daily schedules through the depot that had become the focus of organized intelligence collection. Enhanced security measures protected these operations, while preserving the transportation connections essential for the community's economic and social vitality. The mystery of who had conducted the systematic surveillance and why railway infrastructure had attracted such detailed intelligence collection remained unresolved. The investigation had documented comprehensive reconnaissance activities while strengthening security measures and community awareness that would help protect against future threats to transportation infrastructure critical for regional economic activity. Asterisk, the Riverside District occupies 12 square blocks along the eastern edge of the city, where converted warehouses and renovated industrial buildings house a mixture of residential lofts, small businesses, and art studios. The neighborhood has transformed over the past decade from a declining industrial area into a vibrant community that attracts young professionals and creative individuals seeking affordable urban living. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez works the day shift in Riverside District, patrolling streets that blend historic architecture with contemporary development. She has served this beat for 4 years, watching the neighborhood evolve as new residents and businesses establish themselves among the brick buildings and tree-lined streets that define the district's character. The police logs for Riverside District typically document routine urban incidents, noise complaints from apartment buildings, minor property crimes, occasional disputes between neighbors adjusting to the area's changing demographics and traffic, violations on the busy streets that connect the district to downtown business areas. However, during the spring and summer months of 2019, Sergeant Rodriguez began noticing an unusual pattern in the incident reports filed by district residents and business owners. A series of seemingly minor calls created a mosaic of strange occurrences that individually appeared insignificant, but collectively suggested systematic activity difficult to explain. The pattern began with reports from residents of Warehouse Row, a converted industrial building that housed 32 residential lofts overlooking the river. The building's tenants contacted police multiple times during April and May to report unusual nighttime activities in the parking areas and common spaces surrounding their converted warehouse home. The first call came from Maria Santos, who lived in Unit 4B on the building's 4th floor. Ms. Santos contacted police on Tuesday evening, April 9th, to report that someone had been examining the building's exterior during the previous night. She had observed an individual walking systematically around the warehouse perimeter, apparently documenting architectural features and security installations. Warehouse Row was constructed in 1952 as a textile manufacturing facility before conversion to residential use in 2015. The building retained its industrial character with exposed brick walls, large windows, and minimal exterior lighting that created dramatic shadows during evening hours. The conversion had added security features appropriate for urban residential living while preserving the structure's historic appearance. Ms. Santos had noticed the individual while returning home from work at approximately 11:30 in the evening. The person was walking slowly around the building's exterior, pausing at each entrance and window to examine security measures and architectural details. The individual carried what appeared to be a small electronic device and took photographs using a mobile phone. The person examining the building appeared to be documenting specific features, entrance configurations, window types, fire escape, locations, and the positioning of security cameras installed during the residential conversion. Ms. Santos observed this systematic documentation for approximately 20 minutes before the individual departed through the parking area toward River Street. Sergeant Rodriguez responded to Ms. Santos's call by conducting an evening patrol of Warehouse Row and the surrounding blocks. She found no evidence of criminal activity or property damage, though she noted that the building's design created numerous concealed positions where someone could observe residential activities without detection from inside the units. The second call from Warehouse Row came 3 days later from David Park, who lived in Unit 2A on the building's second floor. Mr. Park contacted police on Friday morning, April 12th, to report that he had discovered evidence of someone examining his building's utility systems during the overnight hours. Mr. Park had noticed footprints in the soft soil around electrical and communications equipment housed in utility enclosures along the building's east wall. The prints indicated that someone had spent considerable time examining these installations, possibly documenting electrical service capacity and communications infrastructure serving the residential complex. The utility enclosures contain standard electrical meters, cable television equipment, and telecommunications connections that serve the 32 residential units. These installations were secured with standard locks and showed no signs of tampering or unauthorized access, though the surrounding area clearly indicated systematic examination. Sergeant Rodriguez documented the footprint evidence and contacted utility companies to verify that no authorized maintenance or inspection activities had been scheduled at Warehouse Row. No legitimate service work was found that would explain the overnight examination of utility installations. The third report from the converted warehouse came from Jennifer Kim, who lived in Unit 1C on the ground floor. Ms. Kim contacted police on Monday afternoon, April 15th, to report that someone had been testing the building's security systems during the weekend hours when most residents were away from their units. Ms. Kim had remained home during the weekend due to illness and had observed unusual activity in the building's common areas and parking facilities. She noticed individuals who appeared to be testing security camera coverage, examining entrance, access controls, and documenting emergency exit procedures. The building's security system included cameras covering the main entrances, parking areas, and elevator lobbies, along with electronic access controls for the main entrance and individual unit doors. Ms. Kim observed people positioning themselves at various locations to determine camera coverage patterns and identifying areas where surveillance was limited or absent. The individuals examining security systems appeared to work in coordination, with one person testing camera coverage while others documented findings using electronic devices. Ms. Kim estimated that the systematic security assessment continued for approximately 2 hours during Saturday afternoon, when the building was largely unoccupied. Sergeant Rodriguez interviewed building management about the security system assessment and verified that no authorized security evaluations or system maintenance had been scheduled. The building's property management company confirmed that all security testing was performed by contracted professionals who would be accompanied by management personnel. The pattern expanded beyond Warehouse Row when residents of River Terrace Apartments, located 3 blocks south along the riverfront, began reporting similar incidents involving systematic examination of their residential complex. The apartment building housed 60 units in a modern structure completed in 2017. The first River Terrace report came from Robert Chun, who lived in apartment 5G on the building's 5th floor. Mr. Chun contacted police on Thursday evening, April 18th, to report that he had observed someone conducting detailed documentation of his building's layout and security features during the early morning hours. River Terrace Apartments featured contemporary design with extensive glass facades, electronic access controls, and underground parking facilities. The building's modern security systems and amenities attracted young professionals who appreciated urban living with enhanced safety and convenience features. Mr. Chun had observed an individual examining the building's exterior while leaving for work at 6:30 in the morning. The person was photographing architectural features, security installations, and access points while taking detailed notes using a tablet computer. The systematic documentation suggested professional interest in the building's design and security systems. The individual examining River Terrace Apartments appeared to focus particularly on the building's parking garage entrance, lobby security, measures, and the relationship between different access points. Mr. Chun noted that the person seemed knowledgeable about building security systems and examined features that would not be obvious to casual observers. Asterisk. Sergeant Rodriguez recognized similarities between the River Terrace incident and the previous reports from Warehouse Row. The systematic nature of the building examinations and the focus on security systems suggested organized intelligence collection rather than random criminal activity or casual interest in architecture. The second River Terrace report came from Susan Walsh, who lived in apartment 3B on the building's third floor. Ms. Walsh contacted police on Sunday morning, April 21st, to report that she had observed coordinated surveillance of her building, involving multiple individuals during the previous evening. Ms. Walsh had noticed 3 separate people examining different aspects of River Terrace apartments simultaneously. One individual documented the building's exterior and security features, while a second person examined utility systems and a third observed residential activity patterns from concealed positions in nearby parking areas. The coordinated surveillance suggested organized intelligence collection, involving multiple specialists focused on different aspects of the residential complex. Ms. Walsh observed apparent communication between the individuals using handheld devices, indicating planned coordination rather than coincidental examination by separate parties. The surveillance session continued for approximately 90 minutes, during evening hours when residential activity was highest. The individuals appeared to document resident schedules, building security procedures, and access patterns while maintaining positions that avoided detection by building security systems. Sergeant Rodriguez contacted building management at River Terrace Apartments to report the surveillance activities and recommend enhanced security awareness among residents and staff. The coordinated nature of the intelligence collection suggested potential planning for criminal activity targeting the residential complex. The pattern extended to include commercial properties when business owners in the Riverside district began reporting similar systematic examination of their establishments. These reports shared common elements with the residential surveillance, but focused on different types of facilities and security considerations. The first commercial report came from Angela Torres, who owned River Gallery, an art space occupying the converted warehouse that exhibited works by local artists. Ms. Torres contacted police on Wednesday morning, April 24th, to report that someone had been examining her gallery during overnight hours when the facility was closed. River Gallery occupied a single-story brick building constructed in 1948 as a manufacturing facility before conversion to exhibition space in 2018. The gallery featured large windows, minimal exterior lighting, and security systems designed to protect valuable artwork while maintaining the open, accessible character that attracted visitors and collectors. Ms. Torres had discovered evidence of systematic examination when she arrived to open the gallery Wednesday morning. Footprints around the building's perimeter indicated that someone had examined each window, entrance, and utility connection, while documenting the gallery's layout and security measures. The examination appeared to focus on artwork storage areas, security system components, and access routes that would allow entry or removal of items from the gallery. Ms. Torres noted that the person seemed particularly interested in loading dock areas and service entrances used for receiving and shipping artwork. Sergeant Rodriguez documented the River Gallery incident and recognized that the systematic examination of commercial properties represented an expansion of the intelligence collection pattern beyond residential buildings. The focus on artwork, storage, and security systems suggested potential planning for theft or other criminal activity targeting valuable cultural property. The second commercial report came from Frank Henderson, who owned Riverside Coffee, a cafe occupying the ground floor of a converted industrial building. Mr. Henderson contacted police on Saturday afternoon, April 27th, to report that he had observed someone examining his establishment during morning hours before the cafe opened for business. Riverside Coffee operated from a space that combined the building's industrial heritage with contemporary cafe design. The establishment attracted neighborhood residents and visitors who appreciated the urban atmosphere and carefully prepared coffee drinks served in a setting that celebrated the district's architectural character. Mr. Henderson had arrived early Saturday morning to prepare for the day's business and noticed an individual examining the cafe's exterior while taking detailed notes and photographs. The person appeared particularly interested in the cafe's supply delivery procedures, employee entrance locations, and cash handling security measures. The examination included documentation of the cafe's relationship to neighboring businesses, access routes for suppliers and employees, and sight lines that would allow observation of internal operations. Mr. Henderson noted that the person seemed knowledgeable about commercial security and focused on aspects of cafe operations that would affect financial and operational security. Sergeant Rodriguez identified similarities between the cafe examination and previous incidents involving residential and commercial properties. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection and the focus on security and operational procedures suggested organized reconnaissance targeting multiple types of facilities in the Riverside district. The third commercial report came from Helen Mitchell, who owned Design Studio, a workspace that provided shared facilities for graphic designers, architects, and other creative professionals. Ms. Mitchell contacted police on Tuesday morning, April 30th, to report systematic surveillance of her facility during the previous weekend. Design Studio occupied a converted warehouse that housed individual workspaces, meeting rooms, and specialized equipment used by creative professionals. The facility attracted tenants who appreciated the collaborative environment and shared resources that supported small creative businesses and independent professionals. Ms. Messel had discovered evidence of detailed examination when she arrived Monday morning to open the studio. The surveillance appeared to have occurred during weekend hours when the facility was largely unoccupied, allowing systematic documentation of workspace layouts, security measures, and valuable equipment used by studio tenants. The examination focused on computer equipment, design software, and intellectual property storage systems that contained valuable creative work produced by studio tenants. Ms. Mitchell noted that the surveillance suggested knowledge of creative industry operations and understanding of the types of valuable assets housed in design facilities. Sergeant Rodriguez compiled comprehensive documentation of all reported incidents and identified patterns that suggested organized intelligence collection targeting multiple property types throughout the Riverside district. The systematic nature of the surveillance and the apparent coordination between activities indicated substantial resources and planning. The investigation expanded to include analysis of the types of properties being examined and the specific information being collected during surveillance activities. The pattern revealed interest in residential security systems, commercial operations, creative industry facilities, and infrastructure supporting the district's mixed-use development. Coordination with other law enforcement agencies revealed that similar systematic surveillance had been reported in comparable urban districts throughout the metropolitan area. The pattern suggested organized intelligence collection targeting diverse urban communities that combined residential, commercial, and creative uses. Federal authorities responsible for investigating organized criminal activity were notified about the Riverside District surveillance pattern. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection and its expansion across multiple property types generated interest from agencies responsible for monitoring activities that might affect community security. Enhanced security measures were recommended for residential and commercial properties that had been targets of surveillance. Property owners and managers were provided with information about detecting and reporting suspicious activities while maintaining the open, accessible character that attracted residents and businesses to the district. Community meetings were organized to inform Riverside District residents and business owners about the surveillance pattern and establish coordination for reporting future incidents. The meetings emphasized awareness and cooperation while avoiding alarm that might affect the neighborhood's continued development and growth. The investigation revealed that intelligence collection activities had been conducted by individuals with detailed knowledge of urban security systems and commercial operations. The sophistication of their surveillance methods suggested either professional training or substantial experience with urban reconnaissance techniques. Regular coordination between law enforcement, property managers, and community organizations was established to maintain awareness of potential security threats while supporting the district's continued evolution as a vibrant urban neighborhood. This coordination balanced security considerations with the open character that attracted diverse residents and businesses. Sergeant Rodriguez continued her daily patrols of the Riverside district with enhanced awareness of surveillance activities, while maintaining community policing approaches that supported neighborhood development. The investigation had strengthened security awareness without compromising the welcoming environment that defined the district's character. The converted warehouses and modern buildings of the Riverside district continued to house the mixture of residential, commercial, and creative uses that had transformed the former industrial area into a thriving urban community. Enhanced security awareness complemented the ongoing development that attracted new residents and businesses to the neighborhood. The police logs documenting surveillance activities in the Riverside district were maintained as part of ongoing investigations into organized intelligence collection targeting urban communities. The comprehensive documentation provided resources for analyzing patterns and identifying potential connections to criminal activity affecting metropolitan area security. The mystery of who had conducted the systematic surveillance and why the Riverside district had attracted such detailed intelligence collection remained unresolved. The investigation had documented comprehensive reconnaissance activities while strengthening community awareness and security measures that would help protect against future threats to the neighborhood's continued development and prosperity. The village of Meadowbrook sits nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling farmland, where stone cottages line narrow lanes that follow routes established centuries ago by farmers traveling between fields and market towns. The village maintains its rural character despite being within commuting distance of larger urban centers, attracting residents who appreciate the peaceful environment and strong sense of community. Constable Emma Thompson serves as the village's primary law enforcement officer, working from a small police station housed in a converted Victorian building on the village green. She has patrolled Meadowbrook for 7 years, building relationships with residents who value the personal attention possible in a community where most neighbors know each other by name. The daily routine in Meadowbrook rarely involves serious criminal activity. Constable Thompson's typical responsibilities include mediating minor disputes between neighbors, investigating occasional reports of petty theft, and providing assistance during community events that bring visitors to experience the village's traditional rural atmosphere. During the late summer and early autumn months of 2020, Constable Thompson began receiving reports from village residents about unusual correspondence arriving through the postal system. These letters shared common characteristics that distinguished them from normal personal or business mail, creating a pattern that suggested systematic activity targeting multiple households throughout Meadowbrook. The first report came from Mrs. Dorothy Hartwell, who lived in Rose Cottage on Church Lane, a stone house built in 1847 that she had inherited from her grandmother. Mrs. Hartwell contacted the police station on Thursday morning, August 27th, to report receiving a letter that contained detailed information about her property and personal circumstances that she had never shared with anyone. Rose Cottage occupied a quarter-acre plot surrounded by mature gardens that Mrs. Hartwell maintained with the help of her neighbor, Mr. James Wilson. The property included the main house, a small greenhouse, and outbuildings that had served various purposes during the cottage's long history. Mrs. Hartwell lived alone since her husband's death 3 years earlier, following routines that had changed little over decades of village life. The letter Mrs. Hartwell received appeared to be typed on a standard computer and printed on ordinary white paper with no distinguishing letterhead or identifying marks. The envelope bore her correct name and address written in block letters, with a local postmark indicating that it had been mailed from within the regional postal district. The letter's content demonstrated detailed knowledge of Mrs. Hartwell's daily routines, property layout, and personal circumstances. The writer described her morning walks through the village, her weekly shopping trips to the market town, and her gardening schedule with accuracy that suggested systematic observation over an extended period. The letter also contained specific information about Rose Cottage's architectural features, including details about the greenhouse location, the arrangement of outbuildings, and modifications Mrs. Hartwell had made to the property over the years. This information was presented in a matter-of-fact tone without any apparent threatening language or demands. Mrs. Hartwell found the letter disturbing, not because of any explicit threats, but because of the comprehensive nature of the surveillance it revealed. The writer clearly had been observing her activities and property systematically, gathering information for purposes that were not explained in the correspondence. Constable Thompson examined the letter and noted the detailed nature of the information it contained. The level of surveillance required to gather such comprehensive data about Mrs. Hartwell's routines and property suggested organized observation, rather than casual interest from a neighbor or acquaintance. The letter provided an clear indication of its purpose or what response, if any, the writer expected from Mrs. Hartwell. The tone was conversational rather than threatening, though the demonstration of extensive surveillance created an atmosphere of unease that motivated Mrs. Hartwell to contact law enforcement. Constable Thompson advised Mrs. Hartwell to preserve the letter and envelope for potential forensic analysis and to report any similar correspondence or suspicious activities around her property. She also recommended enhanced awareness of personal security while maintaining normal routines that were important for Mrs. Hartwell's well-being. Second report came 5 days later from Mr. Jeffrey Pemberton, who lived in Ivy House on Mill Lane, a Georgian property that he had purchased upon retirement from a career in banking. Mr. Pemberton contacted police on Tuesday morning, September 1st, to report receiving a letter similar to the one described by Mrs. Hartwell. Ivy House occupied a prominent position in the village center, with gardens that bordered the village green and provided Mr. Pemberton with excellent views of community activities. He had become involved in village organizations since his retirement, serving on the parish council and helping to organize seasonal events that maintained Meadowbrook's traditional character. The letter Mr. Pemberton received contained detailed observations about his involvement in village activities, his personal habits, and his property's distinctive features. The writer demonstrated knowledge of Mr. Pemberton's role in parish council meetings, his morning walks around the village green, and his gardening activities in the extensive grounds surrounding Ivy House. The correspondence also included specific information about Mr. Pemberton's family circumstances, including details about visits from his adult children and grandchildren that occurred irregularly throughout the year. This personal information could only have been gathered through sustained observation of his household activities. Like Mrs. Hartwell's letter, Mr. Pemberton's correspondence was typed on standard paper with no identifying marks or letterhead. The envelope bore the correct local postmark and was addressed in the same block letter style that had characterized the previous letter. Constable Thompson compared the two letters and identified common elements in their format, tone, and the types of information they contained. Both letters demonstrated extensive surveillance of the recipients while maintaining a conversational tone that avoided explicit threats or demands. Systematic nature of the surveillance and the similar formatting of the letters suggested that multiple Village residents might be targets of the same intelligence collection effort. Constable Thompson began developing procedures for documenting similar reports and analyzing patterns in the correspondence. Third report arrived from Mrs. Angela Crawford, who lived in Willowbank Cottage on Orchard Lane, a property she had purchased after moving to Meadowbrook following her divorce. Mrs. Crawford contacted police on Friday afternoon, September 4th, to report receiving a letter that contained personal information she had shared with very few people in the village. Willowbank Cottage was a smaller property than those occupied by Mrs. Hartwell and Mr. Pemberton, reflecting Mrs. Crawford's more recent arrival in Meadowbrook and her focus on establishing a new life in the rural community. She worked part-time as a freelance editor, conducting most of her business through internet connections that allowed her to serve clients while enjoying village life. The letter Mrs. Crawford received demonstrated knowledge of her professional activities, her adjustment to village life, and personal details about her previous marriage and divorce. The writer appeared to have gathered information from multiple sources, combining observations of her current activities with knowledge of her background and circumstances. The correspondence included details about Mrs. Crawford's work schedule, her social interactions with other village residents, and her efforts to integrate into community activities. This information suggested that the writer had been observing her activities since her arrival in Meadowbrook several months earlier. Mrs. Crawford found the letter particularly disturbing because it revealed that someone had been investigating her personal history and current circumstances with thoroughness that went far beyond casual village gossip or normal community interest in new residents. Constable Thompson recognized that the pattern of surveillance letters was expanding to include residents with different backgrounds and circumstances. The common elements in format and content suggested organized intelligence collection targeting multiple members of the village community. The fourth report came from Dr. Michael Foster, who lived in Manor House on High Street, the largest residential property in Meadowbrook. Dr. Foster had served as the village's general practitioner for 23 years before retirement, maintaining his residence in the community where he had provided medical care for most families. Dr. Foster contacted police on Monday morning, September 7th, to report receiving a letter that contained detailed information about his medical practice, his retirement activities, and his family circumstances. The correspondence demonstrated knowledge that could only have been gathered through extensive research and observation. Manor House occupied extensive grounds that included formal gardens, outbuildings converted to storage and workshop space, and a separate cottage that Dr. Foster occasionally rented to visitors seeking extended stays in the countryside. The property's size and prominence made it a distinctive landmark in the village. Letter Dr. Foster received included information about his former patients, his medical practice procedures, and his family's activities during his years of service to the community. This information was presented in a way that demonstrated detailed knowledge of village history and Dr. Foster's role in community life. The correspondence also contained observations about Dr. Foster's retirement activities, including his work maintaining the village's historical records and his involvement in preserving local traditions. The writer appeared to have systematic knowledge of village institutions and the individuals who contributed to community organization. Constable Thompson noted that the letter to Dr. Foster represented an escalation in the scope of information being collected. The inclusion of details about medical practice and community leadership suggested that the surveillance effort was targeting village institutions and influential residents. The fifth report arrived from Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, who lived in Rose Tree Cottage on Church Lane, near Mrs. Hartwell's property. Mrs. Mitchell contacted police on Thursday afternoon, September 10th, to report receiving a letter that contained information about her family history and her role in village activities, spanning several decades. Mrs. Mitchell had lived in Meadowbrook for 47 years, following her marriage to a local farmer who had inherited family land in the area. She had raised 3 children in the village and had become deeply involved in community organizations, church activities, and preservation of local traditions. Rose Tree Cottage was a traditional stone building that Mrs. Mitchell and her late husband had restored and expanded over their years of residence. The property included gardens that supplied vegetables and flowers for family use and church decorations, reflecting Mrs. Mitchell's integration into village agricultural and social traditions. The letter Mrs. Mitchell received demonstrated knowledge of her family history, her late husband's farming activities, and her ongoing involvement in church and community organizations. The writer appeared to have access to historical records and personal information spanning multiple generations of village life. The correspondence included details about Mrs. Mitchell's children and grandchildren, their movements away from and back to the village, and their continuing connections to Meadowbrook despite living in other locations. This information suggested research into family records and sustained observation of family activities. Mrs. Mitchell found the letter disturbing because it revealed that someone had been investigating not only her current activities, but also her family's historical connection to the village and the land that had supported their livelihood for generations. Constable Thompson recognized that the pattern of surveillance letters was expanding to include long-term residents with deep community connections. The historical nature of some information suggested that the writer had access to village records and documentation spanning multiple decades. Sixth report came from Mr. David Chin, who lived in Honeysuckle Cottage on Mill Lane, a property he had purchased as a weekend retreat before deciding to relocate permanently to the village. Mr. Chun contacted police on Sunday evening, September 13th, to report receiving a letter that contained information about his urban background and his transition to rural life. Honeysuckle Cottage was a smaller property that Mr. Chun had renovated extensively to create a comfortable year-round residence suitable for remote work and his consulting practice. The renovation had involved modernizing utilities and communications while preserving the cottage's traditional character. The letter Mr. Chun received demonstrated knowledge of his professional background, his reasons for moving to the village, and his efforts to establish connections with long-term residents. The writer appeared to have researched his previous urban lifestyle and his motivations for seeking a different kind of community environment. The correspondence included observations about Mr. Chun's adjustment to rural routines, his participation in village activities, and his relationships with neighbors who had helped him understand local customs and traditions. This information suggested ongoing surveillance of his integration into community life. Mr. Chun found the letter concerning because it revealed that someone had been investigating his background and monitoring his adaptation to village life with detail that exceeded normal community interest in new residents. Constable Thompson noted that the surveillance pattern included both long-term residents and newcomers to the village, suggesting that the intelligence collection effort was comprehensive rather than focused on specific types of community members. Seventh and final report came from Mrs. Helen Walsh, who lived in Bramble Cottage on Orchard Lane, a property she had inherited from elderly relatives and decided to occupy rather than sell. Mrs. Walsh contacted police on Wednesday morning, September 16th, to report receiving the most detailed letter yet documented in the series. Bramble Cottage was a traditional village property that had remained in Mrs. Walsh's family for 3 generations. She had moved to the village to care for elderly relatives and had remained after their deaths, finding that rural life suited her better than her previous urban environment. The letter Mrs. Walsh received contained comprehensive information about her family's history in the village, her inheritance of the property, and her decision to remain in Meadowbrook rather than returning to urban life. The writer demonstrated knowledge that could only have been gathered through extensive research into family records and sustained observation. Correspondence included details about Mrs. Walsh's relatives who had previously occupied Bramble Cottage, their roles in village life, and their connections to other families and properties throughout Meadowbrook. This historical information suggested access to genealogical records and community documentation spanning several generations. Mrs. Walsh's letter also contained observations about her current activities, her integration into village routines, and her relationships with neighbors who had known her family members. The writer appeared to understand complex family and community connections that define social relationships in the village. Constable Thompson analyzed all 7 letters and identified common elements that confirmed organized intelligence collection targeting the village community. The letters shared similar formatting, tone, and types of information while demonstrating escalating sophistication in research and surveillance methods. The systematic nature of the correspondence and the comprehensive information it contained suggested that Meadowbrook was the target of organized reconnaissance by individuals with substantial resources and research capabilities. The purpose of this intelligence collection remained unclear from the letter contents. Constable Thompson contacted regional law enforcement authorities to report the pattern of surveillance letters and request assistance with investigation techniques appropriate for analyzing organized intelligence collection activities. The scope and sophistication of the reconnaissance suggested potential connections to broader security concerns. Investigation revealed that similar patterns of surveillance correspondence had been reported in other rural communities throughout the region. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection and its focus on community leadership, family histories, and local institutions suggested organized activity targeting rural social structures. Enhanced security awareness was recommended for village residents who had received surveillance letters. Community meetings were organized to inform residents about the correspondence pattern while maintaining the open, trusting atmosphere that characterized village social relationships. The investigation expanded to include analysis of postal systems, research methods, and information sources that might have been used to gather the comprehensive data contained in the letters. Coordination with national authorities addressed potential connections to organized activities affecting rural community security. Village residents implemented informal coordination for reporting suspicious activities while maintaining normal routines and community relationships. The response balanced security awareness with preservation of the social trust and cooperation that defined Meadowbrook's character as a rural community. Constable Thompson continued her daily patrols and community policing activities with enhanced awareness of potential surveillance activities. The investigation had strengthened village security consciousness while preserving the peaceful environment that attracted residents to rural life. The stone cottages and narrow lanes of Meadowbrook continued to provide the peaceful rural environment that residents valued, though enhanced awareness of potential security challenges reflected contemporary concerns affecting even the most traditional communities. The investigation files documenting the surveillance letters remained active, pending developments that might explain their purpose or identify their sources. The comprehensive documentation provided resources for analyzing intelligence collection techniques and protecting rural communities against similar reconnaissance activities. The mystery of who had conducted the systematic surveillance and why Meadowbrook had attracted such detailed intelligence collection remained unresolved. The investigation had documented sophisticated reconnaissance while strengthening community awareness and cooperation that would help protect village life against future security challenges. Asterisk, the lakeside community of Pine Harbor exists on the shores of Crystal Lake, where seasonal homes and year-round residences dot the forested coastline that has attracted visitors and permanent residents for over 60 years. The lake stretches for 12 miles across pristine water surrounded by protected forest land, creating a natural setting that remains largely unchanged despite gradual development around its perimeter. Deputy Sheriff Karen Mitchell patrols the Pine Harbor area during the summer months when the community's population swells from 200 year-round residents to nearly 800 with the arrival of seasonal visitors. She has worked this beat for 9 years, developing familiarity with both the permanent community and the regular seasonal families, who return each year to their lakeside retreats. The seasonal police records for Pine Harbor typically document minor incidents related to increased summer activity, noise complaints from neighboring properties, minor boating violations on the lake, occasional disputes over property boundaries, or dock usage, and periodic medical calls for visitors unaccustomed to the physical demands of outdoor recreational activities. During the summer season of 2021, Deputy Mitchell began compiling reports that created an unusual pattern of incidents connected to systematic documentation activities targeting the lakeside community. These reports shared common elements that suggested organized intelligence collection rather than the random occurrences typically associated with seasonal community life. The pattern began with reports from property owners along the north shore of Crystal Lake, where larger seasonal homes occupied elevated positions that provided panoramic views of the lake and surrounding forest. These properties attracted families who valued privacy and natural beauty while maintaining the amenities necessary for comfortable extended stays. The first report came from Mr. Robert Hartwell, who owned a cedar-sided house on Lakeview Drive that had been in his family for 23 years. Mr. Hartwell contacted police on Tuesday morning, June 15th, to report that someone had been examining his property during the early morning hours when the house was unoccupied. The Hartwell property occupied 2 acres of forested land with 300 feet of lake frontage, including a private dock and boathouse that accommodated the family's recreational boats and water sports equipment. The house was positioned to take advantage of southern exposure and lake views while maintaining privacy from neighboring properties through careful landscape design. Mr. Hartwell had discovered evidence of systematic examination when he arrived to open the house for the summer season. Footprints around the property's perimeter indicated that someone had walked the entire boundary while examining architectural features, utility connections, and security installations with apparent thoroughness. The examination appeared to focus on the property's infrastructure, electrical service capacity, water and septic systems, communications equipment, and the relationship between the main house and auxiliary buildings. The person conducting the survey had also examined the dock and boathouse facilities with attention to their construction and capacity for supporting various types of watercraft. Deputy Mitchell documented the evidence of property examination and noted that the systematic nature of the survey suggested professional interest in the property's specifications rather than casual curiosity or preparation for criminal activity. The thoroughness of the examination indicated knowledge of property assessment techniques. The second North Shore report came from Mrs. Dorothy Pemberton, who owned a contemporary glass and stone house on Forest Ridge Road that she had built 15 years earlier as a retirement retreat. Mrs. Pemberton contacted police on Friday afternoon, June 18th, to report discovering evidence of detailed documentation of her property and its relationship to surrounding forest land. The Pemberton property was designed to integrate with the natural forest environment while providing modern amenities and dramatic views of Crystal Lake through extensive use of glass and carefully planned sightlines. The house featured sustainable energy systems and water management that reflected Mrs. Pemberton's commitment to environmental stewardship. Mrs. Pemberton had found evidence that someone had examined not only her house and immediate grounds, but also the forest trails and natural features that surrounded her property. The examination included documentation of topography, vegetation, water sources, and wildlife habitats that extended well beyond normal property boundaries. The survey appeared to assess the property's relationship to protected forest land, its access routes through wooded terrain, and its integration with natural systems that supported local wildlife populations. Mrs. Pemberton noted that the examination suggested knowledge of environmental science and land management principles. Deputy Mitchell recognized that the systematic examination of environmental features represented an expansion beyond the infrastructure focus of the previous report. The combined attention to built and natural systems suggested comprehensive assessment purposes that were not immediately apparent. The pattern extended to include properties along the east shore of Crystal Lake when seasonal residents began reporting similar systematic examinations of their homes and recreational facilities. The East Shore featured smaller properties with diverse architectural styles reflecting different eras of lakeside development. The first East Shore report came from Mr. James Morrison, who owned a restored 1960s cabin on Sunset Trail that he had renovated to serve as a family gathering place for multiple generations. Mr. Morrison contacted police on Monday morning, June 21st, to report that someone had been documenting his property's historical features and renovation details, that the Morrison cabin represented typical mid-century lakeside architecture that had been updated with modern systems while preserving its original character and relationship to the lake environment. The renovation had involved careful attention to historical accuracy while incorporating contemporary safety and comfort features that Mr. Morrison had discovered that someone had examined both the cabin's original construction details and the modifications made during renovation. The examination included documentation of building techniques, materials, and systems that reflected different eras of construction and renovation philosophy. The survey also assessed the property's recreational facilities, including a stone fire pit, wooden deck areas, and boat storage that had been designed to accommodate family gatherings while respecting environmental constraints. The documentation suggested interest in how historical properties had been adapted for contemporary use. Deputy Mitchell noted that the historical focus of the Morrison property examination differed from the infrastructure and environmental assessments reported at other locations. The pattern was expanding to include different types of analysis applied to properties with varying characteristics. The second East Shore report came from Mrs. Angela Foster, who owned a modern modular home on Birch Point that she had installed as an affordable approach to lakeside living. Mrs. Foster contacted police on Thursday afternoon, June 24th, to report systematic examination of her property's innovative construction and utility systems. The Foster property demonstrated contemporary approaches to seasonal home construction that emphasized efficiency, environmental responsibility, and cost-effectiveness. The modular design allowed high-quality construction while reducing costs and environmental impact compared to traditional building methods. Mrs. Foster had found evidence that someone had examined the modular construction techniques, utility, connections, and site preparation methods used for her property. The examination included documentation of foundation systems, utility distribution, and the relationship between prefabricated components and site-specific installation requirements. Survey also assessed the property's environmental impact, including stormwater management, waste systems, and energy efficiency measures that reflected contemporary sustainable construction practices. The documentation suggested knowledge of modern building technology and environmental engineering. Deputy Mitchell recognized that the examination of innovative construction methods represented another expansion in the types of analysis being conducted. The pattern now included infrastructure, environmental, historical, and technological assessments of different property types. The pattern extended to include the community's shared facilities, when reports began arriving about systematic examination of public amenities and infrastructure that served the entire Pine Harbor area. These facilities included the community dock, recreational areas, and utility systems that supported both year-round and seasonal residents. The first community facility report came from Mr. David Chun, who served as volunteer coordinator for the Pine Harbor Community Association. Mr. Chun contacted police on Sunday morning, June 27th, to report that someone had been examining the community dock and marina facilities during overnight hours when public Areas were largely unoccupied. The community dock served as a central hub for lakeside recreational activities, providing boat launching facilities, temporary docking for visitors, and storage for community equipment used for lake maintenance and emergency response. The facility was maintained through volunteer efforts and community association funding. Mr. Chun had discovered evidence of systematic examination when he arrived early Sunday morning to prepare the dock area for a community event. The examination had included documentation of dock construction, boat handling capacity, utility services, and the relationship between community facilities and individual property dock systems. The survey also assessed emergency response capabilities, including fire suppression systems, medical equipment storage, and communication systems that connected community facilities with county emergency services. The documentation suggested interest in community safety and emergency preparedness infrastructure. Deputy Mitchell noted that the examination of community facilities represented an expansion beyond individual property assessments to include shared infrastructure and emergency services. The pattern was developing to encompass comprehensive community-wide analysis. The second community facility report came from Mrs. Helen Walsh, who coordinated volunteer activities for lake environmental monitoring and conservation programs. Mrs. Walsh contacted police on Wednesday afternoon, June 30th, to report systematic examination of environmental monitoring equipment and conservation project sites. The environmental monitoring program involved regular testing of water quality, wildlife population surveys, and habitat preservation activities that supported the lake's ecological health. The program operated through cooperation between community volunteers and county environmental agencies. Mrs. Walsh had found evidence that someone had examined monitoring equipment installations, data collection procedures, and conservation project sites throughout the Pine Harbor area. The examination included documentation of scientific equipment, research methodologies, and the relationship between community conservation efforts and regulatory oversight. The survey also assessed natural resource management practices, including forest preservation, shoreline protection, and wildlife habitat enhancement projects that maintain the area's environmental quality while accommodating residential development. The documentation suggested knowledge of environmental science and conservation management. Deputy Mitchell recognized that the examination of environmental programs represented another dimension of community analysis. The pattern now included individual properties, shared facilities, emergency services, and environmental systems that supported community life. The investigation expanded when reports arrived about examination of transportation and utility infrastructure that connected Pine Harbor to regional systems. These reports revealed systematic assessment of the community's connections to external services and resources. The first infrastructure report came from Mr. Frank Henderson, who lived near the area's main access road where it connected with county highway systems. Mr. Henderson contacted police on Saturday morning, July 3rd, to report systematic examination of road infrastructure, utility corridors, and communication systems. The examination had included documentation of road capacity, utility service distribution, and communication infrastructure that connected Pine Harbor to regional networks. The survey assessed both current capacity and potential for expansion or modification of infrastructure systems. Mr. Henderson had observed that the examination appeared to evaluate the community's dependence on external systems and its resilience in case of service interruptions. The documentation suggested interest in infrastructure vulnerability and emergency preparedness at the community level. Deputy Mitchell noted that the infrastructure examination represented the most comprehensive analysis yet reported. The pattern now encompassed individual properties, community facilities, environmental systems, and external connections that supported the entire Pine Harbor area. The final report in the pattern came from Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, who lived near the fire station that served Pine Harbor and surrounding forest areas. Mrs. Mitchell contacted police on Tuesday morning, July 6th, to report systematic examination of emergency services capabilities and coordination procedures. The examination had included documentation of fire suppression equipment, medical response capabilities, communication systems, and coordination procedures with county emergency services. The survey assessed both current emergency response capacity and potential vulnerabilities during peak seasonal population periods. Mrs. Mitchell had observed that the examination appeared to evaluate emergency response effectiveness and identify potential challenges during various scenarios that might affect the lakeside community. The documentation suggested knowledge of emergency management and public safety operations. Deputy Mitchell compiled comprehensive analysis of all reported examinations and recognized that Pine Harbor had been the target of systematic intelligence collection covering every aspect of community infrastructure, environmental systems, emergency services, and residential development patterns. The systematic nature of the surveillance and the comprehensive scope of information being collected suggested organized reconnaissance by individuals with substantial resources and technical expertise. The purpose of this intelligence collection remained unclear from the examination activities themselves. Deputy Mitchell coordinated with county authorities and state police agencies responsible for investigating organized surveillance activities targeting community infrastructure. The comprehensive nature of the Pine Harbor reconnaissance generated interest from agencies responsible for community security and emergency preparedness. Investigation revealed that similar patterns of systematic community assessment had been reported at other lakeside and recreational communities throughout the region. The comprehensive nature of the intelligence collection suggested organized activity targeting recreational community infrastructure and emergency preparedness capabilities. Enhanced security awareness was implemented for Pine Harbor residents and community organizations responsible for maintaining shared facilities and emergency services. The recommendations emphasized vigilance while preserving the open, cooperative character that defined community life. Community meetings were organized to inform residents about the surveillance pattern and establish coordination for reporting future incidents. The meetings balanced security awareness with preservation of the welcoming atmosphere that attracted both year-round residents and seasonal visitors to Pine Harbor. The investigation included analysis of information sources and research methods that might have been used to conduct such comprehensive community assessment. Coordination with federal authorities addressed potential connections to organized activities affecting recreational community security nationwide. Pine Harbor residents implemented informal coordination for monitoring community facilities and reporting suspicious activities while maintaining normal recreational and community activities. The response balanced security considerations with preservation of the lifestyle that defined lakeside living. Deputy Mitchell continued her seasonal patrols with enhanced awareness of potential surveillance activities while maintaining community policing, approaches that supported the cooperative relationships essential for effective seasonal community management. The forested shores of Crystal Lake continued to provide the natural beauty and recreational opportunities that attracted residents and visitors to Pine Harbor, though enhanced security awareness reflected contemporary challenges affecting even remote recreational communities. The seasonal police records documenting the systematic surveillance activities were maintained as part of ongoing investigations into organized intelligence collection targeting recreational communities. The comprehensive documentation provided resources for protecting similar communities against reconnaissance activities. Regular coordination between law enforcement, community organizations, and county emergency services was established to maintain awareness of potential security challenges while supporting Pine Harbor's continued development as a model recreational community balancing. residential needs with environmental stewardship. The mystery of who had conducted the systematic community assessment and why Pine Harbor had attracted such comprehensive intelligence collection remained unresolved. The investigation had documented sophisticated reconnaissance while strengthening community awareness and cooperation that would help protect lakeside life against future security challenges at the cedar-sided homes and glass contemporary houses continued to dot the forested shoreline where families gathered each summer to enjoy the pristine lake environment. Enhanced security consciousness complemented the ongoing stewardship that preserved Crystal Lake's natural beauty while accommodating the human activities that brought meaning and joy to this special place. The investigation files remained active, containing detailed documentation of one of the most comprehensive community reconnaissance operations ever recorded in the region. The systematic intelligence collection had revealed both the vulnerabilities and the strengths of a community that had learned to balance security awareness with the open, trusting relationships that made lakeside living a cherished way of life. Asterisk. The industrial zone on the eastern edge of Riverside City stretches across 47 square blocks of manufacturing facilities. Warehouses and transportation hubs have formed the economic backbone of the metropolitan region. Steam rises from processing plants. Freight trains announce their arrivals with distant whistles, and the steady hum of machinery creates a constant backdrop to the area's 24-hour operations. Inspector Daniel Rodriguez oversees security coordination for the industrial zone during the day shift, working from a regional office that monitors activities across dozens of facilities employing thousands of workers. He has served this assignment for 11 years, developing expertise in the complex security challenges that arise when critical infrastructure, valuable cargo, and high-volume transportation systems converge in a concentrated area. Daily security reports for the industrial zone typically document routine concerns related to large-scale operations, minor accidents involving heavy machinery, occasional theft of materials from storage areas, traffic coordination challenges during shift changes, and periodic inspections of facilities handling hazardous materials or sensitive cargo. During the winter months of 2022, Inspector Rodriguez began receiving reports from facility managers about unusual surveillance activities that appeared to target multiple aspects of industrial zone operations. These reports shared characteristics that suggested systematic intelligence collection rather than the random incidents typically associated with urban industrial environments. The pattern began with reports from managers at Midwest Manufacturing Complex, a cluster of interconnected facilities that produced automotive components for assembly plants throughout the region. The complex occupied 12 buildings across 8 city blocks, employing over 1,500 workers across 3 shifts that maintained continuous production schedules. The first report came from Mr. Richard Patterson, security director for the manufacturing complex's main assembly facility. Mr. Patterson contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Monday morning, January 17th, to report that surveillance cameras had detected systematic examination of the facility's perimeter during weekend hours when production lines were shut down for maintenance. The main assembly facility occupied a modern building constructed in 1998, featuring automated production lines, quality control stations, and shipping areas that coordinated with just-in-time delivery schedules, serving automotive manufacturers across multiple states. The facility's operations were visible through industrial windows and loading dock areas that provided transparency for efficiency monitoring. Security footage revealed that individuals had examined the Kia facility's exterior systematically, documenting loading dock configurations, utility connections, and transportation access routes used for receiving raw materials and shipping finished components. The examination appeared to focus on operational capacity and logistical coordination rather than traditional security vulnerabilities. But those deems Surveillance had been conducted by at least 3 individuals working in coordination, with each person examining different aspects of the facility while maintaining communication through handheld devices. The systematic approach suggested professional knowledge of industrial operations and manufacturing. Logistics. Mr. Patterson noted that the examination had occurred during the weekend maintenance period when reduced security staffing and suspended production created opportunities for undetected surveillance. The timing suggested knowledge of facility schedules and operational patterns that would not be available to casual observers. Inspector Rodriguez documented the surveillance footage and recognized that the systematic examination of manufacturing operations represented potential intelligence collection targeting industrial capacity and production capabilities. The coordination between multiple observers suggested organized reconnaissance rather than individual criminal activity. The second report from Midwest Manufacturing came 3 days later from Ms. Jennifer Walsh, who managed logistics coordination for the complex's shipping and receiving operations. Ms. Walsh contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Thursday afternoon, January 20th, to report that transportation monitoring systems had detected unusual documentation of cargo handling procedures. The logistics facility coordinated movement of raw materials and finished components through a network of truck terminals, rail sidings, and temporary storage areas that served the entire manufacturing complex. The operation required precise scheduling to maintain production flow while managing limited space and transportation resources. Transportation monitoring cameras had recorded individuals examining cargo handling equipment, documenting truck and rail car capacity, and analyzing the coordination systems used for managing complex logistics operations. The examination included attention to scheduling procedures, security measures, and emergency protocols that maintained operational continuity. The surveillance appeared to assess the facility's vulnerability to disruption and its capacity for handling increased or altered cargo volumes. Ms. Walsh noted that the observers seemed particularly interested in transportation bottlenecks and backup procedures used during equipment failures or unexpected demand changes. Inspector Rodriguez recognized that the logistics surveillance represented an expansion beyond manufacturing capacity to include transportation systems and supply chain vulnerabilities. The comprehensive nature of the intelligence collection suggested interest in disrupting or manipulating industrial operations. The pattern extended to include Riverside Chemical Processing, a facility located 6 blocks from the manufacturing complex that produced industrial chemicals used in automotive, construction, and electronics manufacturing. The chemical plant operated under strict safety and security protocols due to the hazardous nature of its materials and processes. The first chemical plant report came from Dr. Michael Foster, the facility's safety director, who contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Sunday morning, January 23rd, to report systematic examination of chemical storage and processing areas during overnight hours when minimal staff were present for monitoring. Operations. Riverside Chemical Processing occupied a secure complex with multiple buildings housing different aspects of chemical production, storage, and shipping. The facility featured extensive safety systems, environmental monitoring equipment, and emergency response capabilities designed to protect workers and surrounding communities from potential chemical hazards. Security systems had detected individuals examining chemical storage tanks, processing equipment, and waste management systems with apparent knowledge of chemical industry operations. The examination included documentation of safety systems, emergency procedures, and environmental monitoring equipment that regulated facility operations. The surveillance had been conducted by individuals who appeared familiar with chemical processing technology and safety requirements. Dr. Foster noted that the observers seemed particularly interested in emergency response procedures, and the facility's coordination with regional hazardous materials. Teams. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with environmental and public safety agencies responsible for overseeing chemical facility security. The systematic examination of hazardous materials operations generated immediate concern due to potential public safety implications of any interference with chemical processing or storage systems. Second chemical plant report came from Mr. Thomas Brewster, who managed the facility's transportation and logistics operations. Mr. Brewster contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Wednesday afternoon, January 26th, to report systematic documentation of chemical shipping procedures and emergency response protocols. Chemical transportation required specialized equipment, trained personnel, and coordination with transportation authorities to ensure safe movement of hazardous materials through urban areas. The logistics involved multiple regulatory agencies and emergency response organizations that maintained oversight of chemical cargo movements. Surveillance footage revealed examination of chemical loading procedures, emergency response equipment, and coordination systems used for managing hazardous materials transportation. The observers appeared to document both routine procedures and emergency protocols that would be activated during transportation, accidents, or security incidents. The examination included attention to communication systems, emergency equipment locations, and coordination procedures with regional hazmat response teams. Mr. Brewster noted that the surveillance suggested interest in understanding or potentially interfering with chemical transportation safety systems. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with transportation security and environmental protection agencies to assess potential threats to chemical facility operations. The comprehensive nature of the surveillance and its focus on emergency procedures suggested organized intelligence collection with potentially serious public safety implications. The investigation expanded to include Riverside Power Station, a natural gas generating facility that provided electricity for the industrial zone and surrounding residential areas. The power plant operated critical infrastructure that supported both economic activity and essential community services throughout the metropolitan region. The first power station report came from Ms. Angela Torres, the facility's security coordinator, who contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Saturday morning, January 29th, to report systematic examination of electrical generation and distribution systems during early morning hours when staffing levels were reduced. Riverside Power Station featured multiple generating units, fuel storage systems, and electrical distribution equipment that connected to the regional power grid. The facility operated under strict security protocols due to its critical infrastructure status and the potential regional impact of any disruption to electrical generation capacity. Security monitoring had detected individuals examining electrical generation equipment, fuel delivery systems, and grid connection infrastructure with apparent knowledge of power generation technology. The examination included documentation of control systems, emergency procedures, and backup generation capabilities that maintained electrical service during equipment failures. The surveillance appeared to assess the facility's vulnerability to disruption and its capacity for maintaining electrical service during various emergency scenarios. Ms. Torres noted that the observers seemed particularly interested in grid connection points and coordination systems used for managing regional electrical distribution. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with federal authorities responsible for critical infrastructure protection to assess potential threats to electrical generation facilities. The systematic examination of power generation systems generated immediate concern due to the essential nature of electrical service for regional economic and community activities. The second power station report came from Mr. David Park, who managed fuel supply and logistics operations for the generating facility. Mr. Park contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Tuesday afternoon, February 1st, to report examination of natural gas delivery systems and fuel storage infrastructure. Natural gas delivery required coordination with pipeline companies, storage management, and safety systems that prevented accidents involving combustible fuel supplies. The logistics involved multiple safety agencies and emergency response organizations that maintained oversight of natural gas facility operations. Surveillance footage revealed systematic documentation of fuel delivery procedures, storage capacity, and emergency response systems used for managing natural gas safety. The observers appeared to examine both routine operations and emergency protocols that would be activated during fuel system failures or security incidents. The examination included attention to pipeline connections, pressure monitoring systems, and coordination procedures with regional emergency response teams. Mr. Park noted that the surveillance suggested interest in understanding or potentially interfering with natural gas delivery and storage systems. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with pipeline security and emergency management agencies to assess potential threats to natural gas infrastructure. The comprehensive examination of fuel systems and emergency procedures indicated organized intelligence collection targeting critical energy infrastructure. The pattern expanded to include Riverside Transportation Hub, a major freight terminal that coordinated truck, rail, and intermodal cargo operations, serving the entire industrial zone. The transportation hub processed thousands of cargo containers daily while managing complex logistics that supported regional economic activity. The first transportation hub report came from Mrs. Dorothy Henley, who managed cargo security operations for the freight terminal. Mrs. Henley contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Friday morning, February 4th, to report systematic examination of cargo handling procedures and security systems during overnight hours when freight operations continued with reduced staffing. Riverside Transportation Hub featured automated cargo handling equipment, extensive rail facilities, and truck terminals that coordinated complex logistics operations 24 hours per day. The facility processed cargo containers arriving from ports, rail networks, and truck routes that connected the industrial zone to national and international supply chains. Security systems had detected individuals examining cargo handling equipment, documentation procedures, and security measures used for managing high-value and sensitive freight shipments. The examination included attention to cargo tracking systems, access controls, and coordination procedures with law enforcement agencies. The surveillance appeared to assess the facility's procedures for handling different types of cargo and its security measures for protecting valuable or sensitive shipments. Mrs. Henley noted that the observers seemed particularly interested in cargo documentation systems and coordination with customs and security agencies. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with transportation security and customs agencies responsible for overseeing freight operations. The systematic examination of cargo handling procedures generated concern due to the economic importance of freight transportation and the potential for disrupting regional supply chains. The second transportation hub report came from Mr. James Walsh, who coordinated rail operations and intermodal cargo transfers at the freight terminal. Mr. Walsh contacted Inspector Rodriguez on Monday afternoon, February 7th, to report examination of rail yard operations and intermodal transfer procedures. Rail operations required coordination with multiple railroad companies, cargo scheduling systems, and safety procedures that manage the movement of freight trains to urban areas. The logistics involved federal transportation agencies and local authorities that maintained oversight of rail, safety, and security operations. Surveillance footage revealed systematic documentation of rail yard procedures, cargo transfer operations, and coordination systems used for managing complex rail logistics. The observers appeared to examine both routine operations and emergency procedures that would be activated during rail system disruptions or security incidents. The examination included attention to rail traffic control systems, cargo transfer equipment, and coordination procedures with railroad, security, and transportation authorities. Mr. Walsh noted that the surveillance suggested interest in understanding or potentially interfering with rail transportation and cargo transfer operations. Inspector Rodriguez coordinated with railroad security and federal transportation authorities to assess potential threats to rail operations. The comprehensive examination of rail systems and intermodal procedures indicated organized intelligence collection targeting critical transportation infrastructure. The investigation revealed connections between all surveillance activities targeting different aspects of industrial zone infrastructure and operations. The systematic nature of the intelligence collection and its comprehensive scope suggested organized reconnaissance by individuals with substantial resources and technical expertise. Analysis of surveillance footage from multiple facilities identified common individuals participating in reconnaissance activities at different locations. The coordination between facilities and the systematic approach indicated organized planning rather than independent criminal activity targeting individual businesses. Enhanced security measures were implemented throughout the industrial zone following the investigation, including improved surveillance systems, increased security coordination between facilities, and enhanced communication with law enforcement and emergency response agencies. Federal authorities responsible for critical infrastructure protection conducted comprehensive threat assessments for all facilities that had been targets of surveillance. The assessments addressed potential vulnerabilities and recommended security enhancements appropriate for each type of industrial operation. Regular coordination meetings were established between facility managers, law enforcement, and emergency response agencies to maintain awareness of potential security threats while supporting continued industrial operations, essential for regional economic activity. Inspector Rodriguez continued his oversight of industrial zone security with enhanced awareness of organized surveillance activities while maintaining the coordination necessary for efficient operations of critical manufacturing, transportation, and energy infrastructure. The industrial zone continued its essential role in regional economic activity, with steam still rising from processing plants and freight trains still announcing their schedules with distant whistles. Enhanced security consciousness complemented the ongoing operations that provided employment and economic stability for the metropolitan region. Investigation files documenting the systematic surveillance activities remained active as part of ongoing efforts to protect critical infrastructure from organized intelligence collection. The comprehensive documentation provided resources for understanding reconnaissance techniques and protecting industrial facilities against similar security challenges. The mystery of who had conducted the systematic infrastructure surveillance and why the industrial zone had attracted such comprehensive intelligence collection remained unresolved. The investigation had documented sophisticated reconnaissance while strengthening security measures and coordination that would help protect critical infrastructure against future threats to regional economic and community security.